Hello everyone, and welcome to another part of What If Deku Had an Infinity Gauntlet. If you enjoy, please like and subscribe. I did not write this story. The original writer is Lord Wolf. Please support them. Now let's dive in. In the middle of a crowded street, a woman was surrounded by a large group of journalists and camera operators. These people had finally tracked down the mother of the infamous apotheosis that recently took on All Might and exposed his secret to world, and now the public wanted to know more about him. When did you realize your son was a villain? One of the reporters asked. Or did you always know? Please leave me be, Inko pleaded as she tried to walk past the crowd of reporters and photographers blocking her path on the sidewalk. Was it the way you raised Izuku that turned him to a life of villainy? Another reporter asked accusingly. That's not, please let me pass, Inko just wanted to go home. Do you know why your son has turned out a villain? A more aggressive one asked while shoving a microphone in the poor woman's face. Unknown to any of them, on the outside of the crowd stood someone a head shorter than most of the adults, wearing a brown trench coat, hat and scarf to hide his face. The figure watched these media vultures harass the lady with his hands in his pockets. His fingers twitched underneath the fabric, and suddenly all the cameras, microphones and devices the reporters were using shut down. What the? The reporters and journalists didn't understand what just happened. Inko took advantage of the situation and slipped past the horde while they were distracted. She silently thanked whatever god was watching over her. The figure in the trench coat nodded his head in satisfaction and strolled away. He had an important reunion to get to after all. Hospital. I lost. Bakugo laid in his hospital bed, staring at the ceiling vacantly. He barely heard the doctor say that he was being released today and that his parents were on the way to pick him up. I lost to Deku. He just kept thinking of that battle over and over again. I was utterly crushed by that nerd. Katsuki glared hard at the space above him. You've seen better days, Kaken. With a startled flinch, Bakugo turned to see Deku sitting in one of the chairs his parents used when they visited. The nerd looked exactly how he did during their battle. Shirtless and covered in dirt and blood spatters, with his gauntlet strapped to his left hand. Tell me, does it hurt? Does it sting? To be so utterly useless, Izuku chuckled. Maybe we should start calling you Deku. Katsuki stared daggers at him. Shut the fuck up, he shouted. Leave me alone. Oh, Kaken. Izuku stood up and smirked down at him. You're already alone, he chuckled. You've got no one. Even me, your mortal enemy, has long since surpassed and left you in the dust where you belong. Stepping closer to the bed, he leaned over, getting right in the blonde's face. If you really want to beat me, take a swan dive off the roof and hope you'll be reborn with a better quirk. Bakugo suddenly snapped awake. His wide red eyes spanned around the room. He realized it was just a dream and calmed himself down. Still though, those last words Deku said in his dream continued to haunt him. Across the city. Damn it, an amorphous blob of green sludge cursed. His gooey body was pressed against the wall of the alley. A mysterious red aura covered his form that prevented him from moving or escaping. He didn't know what happened. The sludge was merely moving to a new hideout after recently escaping prison, and this mysterious figure in a brown coat appeared out of nowhere and attacked him. Imagine my surprise to find you escaped from prison, Mr. Sludge, the figure chuckled. Surprise and delight, he slowly approached the slime pinned to the wall. Who the hell are you? The villain demanded. It's only fitting that I test my stone on the villain that helped start my journey, Izuku smirked, removing the hat and scarf. Plus I need to see if this works on mutation types after all. It's you. The sludge remembered this kid from the day he got splattered by All Might over a year ago. That's how he got arrested in the first place. Don't worry, this won't hurt me. Izuku reached out with his Infinity Gauntlet and grabbed the only solid part of the villain's body, his eye. The slime man screamed in pain as a purple glow engulfed his vision. Meanwhile at UA, Toshinori stared out the window of the teacher's lounge. From his spot he had a good view of the crowd of protesters outside the front gates of the school. Ever since the battle against Midoriya a week ago, where his true form was revealed to the public, people had begun to talk. They were wondering why their greatest hero lied about his power. Quirkless people were wanting to know why they were never given a chance to compete in the field of heroes if the number one hero was also quirkless. The protesters outside consisted of the quirkless, as well as those with almost insignificant, weak and impractical quirks. All of them holding signs that said things like, just like us, Limite, no false gods, quirkless isn't weakness, and symbol of lies. There's more of them since yesterday, a voice said next to him. Toshinori didn't need to turn around to know that it was Aizawa who entered the room. After everything we do for the people, they turn on you this fast. It sometimes makes you wonder why we even do it, he commented. You have to see it from their perspective, the skinny man sighed. Many people who lack a quirk or have an impractical quirk who had dreams of being a hero just like young Midoriya did, and just like him were denied a chance to even try. He stared sadly at the protesters. I used to think it was for their own protection, but now I'm starting to think that it really is prejudice that keeps them from competing in our arena. I can't argue since I'm biased myself. Aizawa knew all too well how that felt. He had an impractical quirk, but was one of the rare lucky ones to be given a chance to be a hero. This is off topic, but Katsuki Bakugo was let out of the hospital. Their student suffered a broken right arm that needed surgery, a dislocated left arm, a concussion, and a few cracked ribs. Midoriya really let him have it. The other students got off easy compared to him. From what I was told, Bakugo and Midoriya have a history together, Toshinori explained. Based off of young Bakugo's personality, not a good history I bet. I can imagine Midoriya's delight, Aizawa said sarcastically. To wield all that power against a boy you share a lot of bad blood with. How could he resist? How are the others? Toshinori asked. Still on house arrest, the homeroom teacher said without missing a beat. He was pissed when he found out a handful of students went to a junkyard to confront Midoriya. As soon as Bakugo was taken away by the paramedics, Aizawa immediately laid into them. They were all on house arrest for 2 weeks for their reckless behavior. I can't say I condone what they did, but I admire their bravery, Toshinori confessed. Doesn't excuse nearly throwing their lives away. Aizawa crossed his arms in disapproval. Luckily Midoriya is a merciful villain. I wouldn't go so far as to call him merciful, Toshinori said. The kid did everything possible to hurt him in one of the worst ways by exposing his true appearance to the world. Oh good. You're both here. A voice said entering the room. They looked to see the small form of Principal Nizu by the door holding a bright yellow shopping bag. Where have you been all morning? Aizawa questioned. Comic book stores, the mouse bear creature explained simply. Comic book stores? They both asked. Let me explain. Nizu approached the two men. I've doing a little research on Izuku Midoriya's device, based off what you told me. At first I couldn't find any good leads, but when I looked up the words Infinity and Gauntlet I found something rather interesting. He paused dramatically. I then went around every comic book store in the city until I found this. He reached into the bag, pulled out a book and held it for them to see. The book was titled Infinity Gauntlet. This is a comic book by Marvel Comics from a long time ago, before the Age of Quirks began. Nizu handed Aizawa the book. You've got to be kidding me. Aizawa looked at the cover, noticing the purple-skinned character with a gold gauntlet on his hand, various stones attached. Almost like Midoriya's version, except the comic had 6 not 5. I'm afraid not, Nizu frowned. Are you telling me he got the idea to build his gauntlet from a comic book? Toshinori couldn't believe this. Indeed, Nizu said while Aizawa began flipping through it. It seems Midoriya is a fan of these comics. This is impossible. Shota began reading the pages for the possible connections. I hate to admit it, but young Midoriya is extremely brilliant. If anybody could figure out a way to make it possible, it would be him, All Might said honestly. If his gauntlet is based off the one in the comic book, then how did the heroes in that beat it? They don't, Nizu said as a matter of fact. The villain is just too powerful and ends up losing due to his own ego and arrogance. And Midoriya, as previously established, is the furthest thing from stupid, Aizawa commented. He won't make the same mistakes and we shouldn't count on him to. This might give us an idea about kind of powers he now possessed though, Toshinori added, taking the book to flip through it himself. Not quite, the small animal sighed. Based off what you witnessed, Midoriya's stones work differently than the ones in the comic. His reality stone manipulates matter, his time stone only briefly stops time in an isolated area and heals physical damage, and his space stone gives him some kind of invisible force field as well as warping abilities. Let's not forget his power stone, right, All Might, Aizawa added. Unfortunately, due to One for All's unique method of transfer, Midoriya was able to fully acquire the quirk from a sample of your DNA, Toshinori, Nizu summarized. Now that he has it, it's only a matter of time before it fades from you, is that right? There has to be a way to get it back. Toshinori clenched his fists in anger and frustration. Maybe if we can get the gauntlet and the stones from him, but he obviously won't allow that without a fight, the principal said, referencing the recent battle against the young villain. I hate to say it, but you might have to fight him again, this time with everything you got. Could you go all out on a villain that you created? All Might asked. Not sure, I've never created a villain before, Nizu said with honesty. On a related note, I had another reason for coming in here, he paused. Your successor Mirio, he's been in the training room all week since that battle. Can you go speak to him? All right, Toshinori wondered why Mirio was working himself so hard when it was the weekend. Once he was gone, the two faculty members continued talking. There's another thing that worries me about this comic book, Aizawa said while flipping through it again. The Soul Stone, according to this, has power over life and death. It can also extract souls. Midoriya's stones don't work the same, remember, Nizu reminded him. So what do you think it does? For it to hold such high value for him, it must be powerful. Aizawa and Nizu both frowned, thinking all the possibilities. The homeroom teacher went back to the window to watch the protesters outside. He spotted a brown-haired girl carrying a few boxes, suitcases, and backpack. She was headed towards the exit. The principal also observed her. I hate that we had to expel her, but the government was putting a lot of pressure on our school to make an example out of someone after that stunt they pulled, Nizu sighed with regret. I don't like it either, but she knew where Midoriya was hiding, didn't tell anyone and went alone to confront him. Aizawa watched her go around the protesters. She's lucky her friends followed her, or she could have been seriously hurt or dead. I hope she ends up alright. Nizu watched her disappear. Outside, Ochako carried her belongings down the street with difficulty. She could have used her quirk to make it easier, but she honestly didn't feel like it. The only place Uraraka had to go was the apartment she got before the school built the dorms. Luckily the rent was already paid for the whole school year, so she could still live there until she figured out what to do. Expelled, that word still left her numb. Though Uraraka couldn't deny that she deserved it for endangering her friends. They tried to defend her, but the faculty wouldn't have it. Even Mei attempted to speak up, telling them that it was her idea to go find Midoriya, as she knew about the junkyard. For that she was kicked out of the development studio and given house arrest for 3 weeks. Principal Nizu apologized and said he had no choice. The government was cracking down on hero schools, especially UA, not just for safety, but also on students recklessly endangering themselves before they even graduated. The academy had no choice but to expel one of them, and since Uraraka was the one to leave school grounds to find and confront a villain, she was it. Her provisional license and hero costume were of course confiscated, along with her staff. She was then given till the weekend to find other living arrangements, pack her belongings and leave the dorms. Ida was probably the most upset. He kept going on about how he should have tried harder to convince them to leave rather than stay and fight. Tsuyu was a crying mess. Kirishima said how unmanly it was that she was expelled. Momo felt guilty as it was his plan and strategy that failed to defeat Midoriya. Todoroki hadn't said anything, but kept glancing at her regretfully. No one had seen Bakugo yet as he was still in the hospital. After saying goodbye, Uraraka packed the rest of her things and left the school grounds. Making her way down the street, Ochako's mind kept going over what to do next. She could apply for other hero schools in the country, but with her record of expulsion it may prove difficult. She hadn't even told her parents yet that she was kicked out of UA. Oh great, she sighed as she felt drops of water hit her head. It had started to rain, worsening her already sour mood. Just when she thought that it couldn't get worse, she tripped and dropped all her cases on the sidewalk. She knelt down to pick them up and attempt to fight back tears of frustration. Do you need a hand? A voice asked. Uraraka didn't look up but saw a pair of black boots standing in front of her. No thank you. Before she could say anything further, her boxes were levitated in the air and the rain was parted around them. Then perhaps you need a friend. A gold gauntlet-covered hand with a purple stone inside the palm entered her vision. Ochako looked up in surprise to see Izuku standing there with his hand held out. The girl was too shocked for words. There stood the villain that thrashed them all a week ago, out in public and in broad daylight. Izuku smiled down at her as Uraraka began looking around, wondering if anybody else was seeing him. One of the abilities the Soul Stone grants me is called Notice Me Not. Unless I do something to directly get their attention, the people around us will ignore me, he explained as simply as possible. What do you want? Ochako asked while keeping a wary eye on him. I just wanted to have a talk with you, he said. Do you have somewhere private we can go? He noticed she looked unsure. I promise I won't hurt you. Okay, swallowing nervously, the former student decided to believe him. I have an apartment not far from here. Izuku nodded and helped carry her belongings. Training room. Mirio, Toshinori called, interrupting the boy's practice, causing him to trip mid-swing and nearly fall flat on his face. Luckily he phased through the floor and his clothes before he embarrassed himself. Popping back out of the ground the third year quickly put his pants back on. All Might. Mirio greeted him. So I've been told that you've been training here all week, you've barely taken a break, the hero said in a chastising tone. That's not good for your health, young Mirio. I know, the other blonde had the decency to look a bit ashamed. It's just, after what happened last week, and then those protesters showed up. I just need to get stronger. I understand you feel frustrated, Toshinori sighed and looked down. Believe me, I feel even more frustrated than you do. He walked over to what was supposed to be his successor. You probably feel angry at Midoriya for what he's done. I'm not angry at him, Mirio suddenly interrupted. I feel sorry for him. Come again? I think he's lost and just very angry at the world, Mirio explained. After what you told me about him, I think I get it. I would probably be similar to Izuku if I was in his shoes. That's... Toshinori was at a loss for words. I want to save him. He's just a boy that's given up on heroes, Mirio looked at his teacher. That's why he wants to create a new hero society. I'll convince him that there's still hope, he said with extreme positivity. I'll be his hero if that's what it takes. Mirio, Toshinori looked at his successor with pride before buffing himself up. You're absolutely right. He gave his trademark smile. Young Midoriya is a villain that needs to be saved, not pummeled into oblivion. Forgetting his earlier conversation about taking the boy seriously as an enemy, he carried on. We'll take back One for All and Midoriya from the clutches of evil if that's what it takes. It wasn't wrong to hold on to the hope that Izuku could be brought back. A bit naive perhaps, but not wrong. Why? Because we are here. They both shouted in unison. Now the only problem is, I have no idea what young Midoriya will do next. Toshinori's words suddenly dampened the mood. None? Mirio questioned. The hero shrunk back to his skinny form in a cloud smoke when an unpleasant thought popped into his head. I think there is one person who might know, but it's someone I hope to never talk to ever again. Elsewhere. This is a nice apartment, Izuku commented as he placed the bags down. It was small, but cozy. See, can I get you a drink? Ochako stuttered nervously. A villain in her apartment. How could she not be nervous? You're afraid of me, he stated. The green-haired teen looked down at his gauntlet. All this power I wield, against heroes. You should be afraid, that was an honest fact. I'm so terrifying, he said playfully with his hands raised like claws, trying to lighten the mood. It didn't work. After a minute of awkward silence, Uraraka finally decided to speak. How long have you been planning this? She asked. About a year ago, way before I met you in May, Izuku told her honestly. Just tell me why? Uraraka pleaded. Because I can't stand this world we live, he glared down at the floor. This ridiculous power-controlled hero-based society. Izuku walked over to the window in her apartment. For years I was treated as an outcast, a stain on society, for the simple act of being born without a quirk. According to everyone I had no purpose, no use to the world, no reason to even be alive. I felt so alone. He paused and placed his hand on the glass. So I wanted to be a hero, because I figured there were more people like me out there. I thought that maybe if they could see a quirkless person become a hero, that would give them hope that the world isn't so terrible. I just wanted to do right, and instead I was met with scorn and ridicule from people like Bakugo. His tone turned angry. Then I met All Might, and here I thought the hero who preaches that anyone can be a hero would believe in me, but no, it turns out he's just like everyone else. All that matters to him and everyone is power. Izuku turned to face her. So I figured if that's what it takes, then I'll become the most powerful person on the planet and change the rules of society. All of this chaos, just to twist society into your vision? Uraraka couldn't believe that was his reason. I didn't twist anything, Izuku smiled. All I did was shake things up and expose All Might for the fraud that he is. But all that destruction you caused was necessary to show the world what I'm capable of. He cut her off. I've merely challenged the status quo, and since the current hero society is held together by such flimsy threads, it's all starting to unravel. Because of you, the Gravity Girl argued. Would you rather someone else with ill intentions, like the League of Villains, bring down society? Izuku argued back. You're saying you don't have ill intentions? Ochako pointed at him. Yes. All I want is to create a new hero society, a real one, a solid one that isn't built on lies and the broken dreams of others. He noticed she looked away sadly. I would think you Uraraka would understand better after what they did to you at Udata. What are you talking about? She glared at him. It's pretty obvious, isn't it? Izuku walked towards and began to circle the girl. I saw you leaving the academy in street clothes carrying your things. They expelled you, didn't they? He stopped in front of her. Why did you come to Raxus junkyard? The green-haired boy stood closer to her. I just wanted to talk to you, Ochako said honestly. I didn't come looking for a fight. I was hoping to get you to turn yourself in, as I don't believe you're evil. That was brave of you, Izuku smiled at her. Very heroic of you too, and your friends followed you there, I'm guessing. Yes. You tried to do the right thing and look what happened, they expelled you. Izuku tilted his head. Do you know why? Because I recklessly endangered myself and others, Ochako repeated what Aizawa and the principal told her. But your intentions were good, he reminded her. Ask yourself, why didn't they expel Bakugo? He didn't come to help you or the others. He just wanted to fight me, and he didn't even have a provisional license. Ochako's eyes widened when she realized that he had a point. Why didn't they expel him? The explosive hothead must have broken more rules than she did. The answer is simple. They weighed the value of you all, choose you as the least valuable, and then cut you loose. That's not true. Uraraka yelled at him. Bakugo is so powerful that they can't afford to lose the top student in your year, Izuku continued despite seeing her start to tear up. They need him to be a hero, that's why they don't try to improve his behavior and why they're letting him get away with reckless endangerment, while you, a girl with much less power, is expendable to the hero profession. But that's not fair. She cried. Why is it like that? Congratulations. You're starting to understand that power is all that matters. Izuku held his arms out. Just like I did. This is the world we live in, Ochako Uraraka. Nobody cares about doing the right thing and real heroes don't exist. He turned around to look back out the window. This society is built on empty hollow pillars, precariously balanced. Now that I've tipped that balance, it's all crumbling down. Those protesters outside U.A are just the beginning. Soon more people will start seeing the cracks and flaws in our hero system, and then they'll start wanting change. He chuckled lightly. Sadly, the government is reluctant to change, and why should they change when they've got the ultimate hero, All Might, up their sleeve? Except All Might isn't what he appears to be. Ochako was starting to understand his plan. Now that everybody knows the truth about him, he can no longer be seen as the symbol of peace. Now you're getting it. Izuku faced her again. One more major push and the government will have no choice but to turn to someone else. You mean you? He merely smiled at her instead of answering. It finally came together for Uraraka as to why he did this. No one would listen to a quirkless boy no matter how smart he was in this power-obsessed world, but now that he was one of the strongest people in existence, Izuku would actually be taken seriously. Uraraka, how would you like a job? Izuku offered. What kind of job? She asked. How would you like to be a real hero? He questioned. You said you wanted to be a hero so your parents can live comfortably. That's a very noble cause. Izuku held out his right hand towards her. But if you work with me, we can make sure even more people live comfortably. We can fix this broken hero system, so people like us aren't tossed aside like trash anymore. His words were sounding more and more attractive to her. Even his actions were all making perfect sense. In a corrupt society, any change that threatened those in power wasn't allowed. That's why the change Izuku was trying to make seemed like acts of villainy, but in reality it was all for the betterment of the world and those who lived in it. Slowly Ochako reached out and gently took his offered hand. It sounded like she could still achieve her dreams. Despite U.A deeming her unworthy and kicking her out, she could still be a hero in Izuku's new world. Excellent, the green-haired teen smiled, clearly pleased that she made the right choice. Now, as a show of faith, I'm going to let you in on the next phase of my plan. Can I trust you with this? Without hesitation, Uraraka nodded. Tartarus prison. Well, a nearly faceless man secured to a chair and life support machine smirked. This is indeed a surprise. The great symbol of peace, here to visit me, he chuckled darkly. Returning to the scene of your crime? You're as cheerful as ever, All Might noted. You'd think having your face smashed in would rob you of some of that humor. My humor is one of the few things I have left, All for One said with a smile. You took nearly everything else, including my freedom. We could argue all day who had more taken from them, but I want to talk about something else. Toshinori glanced at the clock in the interrogation room he was in. He was only given 15 minutes to speak to the villain, and that was even with his reputation. All for One was behind the impenetrable glass, smiling like the cat that got the canary despite his situation. Go on then, the villain mocked. What did you do to him? All Might asked. Him? You're going to have to be more specific. He had did a lot of things to a lot of people after all. Izuku Midoriya. What did you do to that boy? At the mention of that name All For One's grin widened. What did I do to him? I should be asking you that. The villain turned it around on his enemy. What did you do to Izuku? Cut the crap, All Might snapped at him. Turning my master's grandson into a villain is one thing, I can understand that, but why involve Midoriya? He has nothing to do with us, so why make him so twisted? It was here that All For One laughed. You're right, he has nothing to do with heroes and villains. Quirkless people should stay in their place, is that right? He spoke with thick sarcasm. It's that very thinking that brought out the worst in Izuku. Oh, and for the record, I didn't do anything to him, that boy was already twisted before he got to the League of Villains. You're lying, All Might argued. All I did to Izuku was pat him on the head and say that I believe he could do great things, the faceless villain frowned. You crushed his hopes and dreams, yet I'm in here while you're out there. Isn't it ironic, All Might? You see Midoriya as someone to manipulate, don't you? Toshinori stated angrily. Not a single one of you people seems to understand what a rare gem Izuku is, All For One chuckled. A genius mind unburdened by the arrogance and ego that a quirk would give him. You know, had I never found Tamura, Izuku would have made a wonderful successor. All Might silently fumed at the taunts while the man talked. I even offered him a quirk, but he refused. His heart was set on that device of his after all. You knew about his gauntlet? Toshinori thought it strange that he allowed Midoriya to build such a thing under his watch. Of course I did. I not only approved it, but I gave him ideas on whose quirks to use in making the stones. All For One remembered the boy fondly. He calls it the Infinity Gauntlet. A device capable of blurring the lines between mortals and gods. He got the very idea from an old comic book, isn't that funny? How much did you tell him about One for All? All Might asked with a glare. Everything, the scarred man chuckled. I told him everything, and judging by the state you're in, he actually did. He did what I failed to do multiple times, he stole One for All. The villain laughed at that. I don't see what's so funny, the gaunt man said. It's not in your hand, so why are you laughing? Because it's all come full circle, All For One joyfully stated. My arrogance led to you being created, All Might. Then you defeated me and took my throne, he frowned at the memory. But now it's your turn. Your ego led you to create Izuku, and now all that's left for you to do is fade away while our young prince takes his new throne. Shut up. I didn't come here to argue about who's to blame for what, All Might spat at him. Let me guess, you want to know what he'll do next? All For One correctly deduced the reason for his enemy being here. How should I know? He smirked at him through the glass. All that time Midoriya spent with the League, around you, and he never once told you what he plans to do with his gauntlet? Toshinori found that hard to believe. Oh no. He told me what he wanted to achieve, which is the complete reconstruction of this hero society, but he never told me how he planned to accomplish this. Would you like to hear my theory? Taking the hero's silence as a yes, he continued. If I had to guess, Izuku plans on creating a war between heroes and villains. A war that he will be the deciding factor in. Snickering a bit, he went on. Imagine it, the quirkless boy that everyone deemed useless, both sides clamoring to win his allegiance. The only question is which side has what he wants most. He would never get away with it, All Might interrupted. The government would never bow down to the whims of teen. A genius teen that figured out a way to make impossible things possible, All For One corrected. You should really have more faith in your soon-to-be ruler. That won't happen. Toshinori stood up from his seat. I won't allow it. Please don't approach the glass. A voice over the intercom said loudly. And what can you do to stop him? The scarred man laughed. The former symbol of peace, on the last dregs of his now fading power. You probably can't even bring yourself to tear into him like you did to me. The guilt is too much for you, I imagine, knowing you are the one who broke him down in the first place, just to rub more salt into the wound, he added. What a world we live in. Heroes creating villains. No wonder Izuku wants to change it. Finally having enough, Toshinori turned around and marched out before the time was up on his visit, but not before tossing one last thing at his enemy. Even if he does create a new world, you'll never get to see it, and with those parting words he left him there in his cell. All Might, All For One chuckled to himself now that he was alone. My only regret is that I won't be able to see the look on your face when you find out what Izuku's soul stone does. With the sounds of his life support machines as his only company, he continued to ponder the coming change to society. Later that night, Asuma Kenichi was a skinny pale man in his early 20s. Currently he was waiting for his brother to meet him at the parking garage where fellow criminals and villains met to plan jobs and find recruits. Both Asuma and his brother possessed unique quirks that made them highly desirable for most premeditated robberies. As he looked around he noticed the garage was oddly abandoned, which it usually wasn't unless there was a high-ranking hero in the area. Before he could wonder why that was, he heard footsteps from behind. He whirled around to see a figure at the other end of the garage walking out of the shadows. "Who's there?" Asuma called. Stepping into the light he finally recognized who it was. The green messy hair was a dead giveaway. This kid was what everyone was talking about lately after the way he exposed All Might. Also it came to light in the media that he was Apotheosis, the very strategist that he worked with on a few bank jobs in the past, back before the kid decided to go pro in his villainy. "Oh hey kid, it's been a while." Izuku smiled as he slowly walked towards him. "You've been doing pretty well for yourself." Taking that bastard goody two-shoes All Might down a peg, the boy remained silent as he stopped a few yards away from the criminal. "Asuma Kenichi," Izuku finally said. "You and your brother possess interesting ocular quirks." He smirked as he remembered the notes he took on them. "He had X-ray vision and you have eye stamp, a unique ability that lets you place fully functioning eyeballs on any surface that you can see through. It makes you the perfect lookout." He paused before chuckling and awkwardly rubbing the back of his head. "Sorry, I remember people better by what their quirks are." Okay, Asuma was getting weirded out by this conversation. Something was wrong, he could feel it, but didn't know what. "Do you know what a soul is, Kenichi-san?" Izuku asked as he took a step closer. "I can't say that I do." Asuma was wondering when his brother would get here. "I did a lot of research and it turns out there are no quirks in the world that affect a human soul, mainly because the soul is not a tangible measurable thing." He stepped even closer. "So I decided to delve into some spiritual philosophies about the existence of a soul, and one thing I came across was rather interesting." Even closer now. "A soul is what each individual person values most. If you desire money, then your soul is wealth. If it's friendship and bonds you crave, then your soul is love." Izuku was just a few steps away from Asuma now. "In this society where a quirk is the main factor that decides a person's worth, what do you think everyone values most?" MMPH. Izuku's gauntlet-covered hand shot out and grabbed Asuma by the face. A neon-purpled vein-like pattern spread across the criminal's face along with the rest of his body. Asuma let out a muffled scream as felt the painful effects of the soul stone. When it was finally over, the vein subsided, Izuku let go of the taller man and watched his unconscious body collapse on the floor without care. Not even giving the man a second thought, he walked over to a nearby wall. Placing his open right palm on the wall, black sparks and purple veins covered his limb. When Izuku removed his hand, he smiled in satisfaction as he saw a green eye staring back at him in the concrete surface. Testing it out, he had it look around, making sure he could see through it perfectly. "Isn't this poetic?" he commented to himself as he looked down at the soul stone in the palm of his gauntlet. "All for one and one for all, together at last," he smirked triumphantly. "It's like reuniting two brothers who have been fighting for years." Reaching into the pocket of his trench coat, he pulled out a piece of paper containing a list of criminals he worked with in the past with quirks he thought had potential uses. Izuku took out a pen from his other pocket and crossed off Asuma's name. It was all-out war between heroes and villains. With All Might's weakness exposed, villains became bolder and bolder every day. Heroes and villains were working overtime to keep up. Not only that, but someone was providing them with information on heroes, particularly the ins and outs of their quirks, fighting techniques, how to beat them, weaknesses and detailed strategies. The police had an idea as to who it was that was providing them with these plans. Izuku Midoriya, known for his intelligence, must have been the one. Though they still had no idea what he had to gain by helping villains fight heroes. The main issue was that they had no way of tracking the boy. With the warping ability that his gauntlet gave him, he could be anywhere at any time. It was the same problem with tracking the League of Villains who had Kurogyri in their employ. Speaking of the League, their movements had also become bolder with an ally like Midoriya backing them. Just recently in the past week they had conducted an attack on a pro-hero rally that was started in response to all the anti-hero and All Might protesters. The purpose of the rally was to show support and faith in the hero. It had backfired horribly when the villain Dabi showed up along with a handful of nomas to attack the crowd. Sadly, the only heroes that showed up to the rally were low-ranking heroes looking to improve their public images and were no match for the enhanced artificial monsters. By the time Endeavor leading a few other high-ranking heroes finally arrived to the scene, many innocent people were badly injured and Dabi had fled as soon as he spotted the number 2 hero, leaving them to take out the nomas. The result was another severe dive in public opinion towards heroes, and the amount of protesters had more than doubled. The quirkless minority who were joined with the inferior quirk class had now merged with the ever-increasing group of citizens who had lost faith in heroes. That was a lot of people calling for answers from not just the heroes but the government as well. They were also demanding a change in hero organization while the quirkless demanded equal rights. The quirkless citizens have always been crying out for equal rights, however they never had a voice since no one cared about them and neither did they have a figure to inspire them. That's where Izuku Midoriya came in. His debut with his quirkless state and seemingly limitless power gave these people hope and the idea planted in their head they were not as helpless and weak that the majority of the world mocked them for. Then All Might's quirkless status was revealed by that very teen, further cementing the fact that quirkless people can be strong too if given the chance. With the number one hero's silence on the matter only making the situation worse. All Might did not want to keep quiet. If anything, he would love to explain the situation to the public. Unfortunately, that would mean publicly divulging the secret to his overwhelming power, that secret being the one for all quirk. Not only that, but he would be forced to tell everyone that power is now in the wrong hands of Izuku Midoriya. The panic that would cause is not something anyone wanted to be responsible for. The Prime Minister's administration was pressured every day, including the Hero Public Safety Commission. Normally All Might, the symbol of peace, was also the symbol of the government's strength, and kept the population in a blissful calm that everything was all right. However, that all depended on the hero maintaining his unfaltering image. Now that the truth about the state of the symbol of peace was out, the image was slowly crumbling and with it the government's hold over a population that possessed superpowers. It was at this time when faith in heroes was bleeding out that Izuku Midoriya pressed down on that bloated chest with his mighty hand. Gefishu. What are we doing here? Ochako asked. You are enjoying a coffee and bagel, Izuku said as he placed said beverage and food on the table in front of her, before sitting down across from her. I am waiting for something. He glanced down at his watch. Aren't you hungry? Uraraka wondered as she helped herself. It seemed odd that he brought her here this morning. Apparently the green-haired gauntlet wielder wanted to demonstrate the next part of his plan that he was implementing. I ate before I arrived. Izuku looked to his watch again. Here they were in broad daylight, sitting in the outside eating area of the cafe. He was completely unconcerned that people would see him. First of all, what could anybody do to him? They could call for heroes, but he would be long gone before they arrived. Second, that notice me not quirk the soul stone gave him rendered him inconspicuously unnoticeable to the average bystander. Out of the corners of their eyes it would seem like a young brown-haired teenage girl was sitting alone. What are you waiting for? Ochako asked as she took a sip of her coffee. It's been a while since she had agreed with his plan to reform the Hero Society. They had spent that whole night talking about the next part of his plan and what he would do when he took control. Over the next few months they met up to discuss what would happen. Izuku refrained from keeping her out of the loop. That included telling her about his contact with the League of Villains and various other villains. You'll see, Izuku sat back and relaxed as the next part of his plan was about to begin. Ochako had surprisingly kept in contact with her friends at UA, and interestingly enough Izuku never pressured her for information on the school. Further proof that he wasn't using her. He did ask about Shoto and Tenya once. Shoto was spending a lot of time visiting his mother at the hospital she was committed to. It seems his battle with Midoriya had lit a fire within him, in more ways than one. Unlike before where he silently opposed his father, he now did it quite vocally and sometimes physically. Midoriya convinced him that he was superior to Endeavor in every way, and that his destiny was not to surpass All Might or his father, but to be a great hero unlike either of them. Endeavor couldn't do anything to his rebellious son without causing a media scandal. He was able to sweep the incidents like his wife and missing firstborn son under the rug, but Shoto was quite a popular student at U.A, having made a striking debut at the sports festival. Plus the icy hot boy lived at the dorms now, so at the moment he couldn't touch him. Tenya kept himself busy with training and his work-study program. He was working with the same agency his brother once worked in. The grief over having a friend expelled from the school was being used to try and better himself so that such a thing wouldn't happen again to anyone else. It seemed he was following Izuku's advice after all. Uraraka's other friends Tsuyu, Momo, and Kirishima would sometimes visit her apartment to see how she was holding up and to talk about what was happening. Izuku always made himself scarce when they came by, warping away as soon as they knocked on the door. No one suspected that the former U.A student was secretly working with the infamous Apotheosis. And here he comes, Izuku smirked, looking across the street at a tall man wearing a yellow suit and a green mask hidden in the shadow of his fedora. The big head killer. I heard a rather interesting tip in the underground that he would be committing one of his random acts of violence, right here at this time at this street corner, he explained. The big head killer was a psychopath in a bright green mask that made his head look abnormally large, hence the name. A madman that liked to murder in public in really elaborate ways, like the villains in the old cartoon show. Dropping pianos, or anvils on innocent people, blowing up buildings with ridiculous-looking bombs, and Rube Goldberg machines that ended in someone's death. The villain was never caught because of his random pattern and his quirk that allowed him to melt his body into liquid and slither down drains. However, he did have friends in the underground. Friends that Izuku persuaded to tell him where the killer would hit next. Remember, Uraraka, don't do anything. Just sit there and act like a normal concerned citizen and leave when you're finished eating, Izuku said before flash warping away. Hold on to you hats, ladies and gentlemen. The big head killer laughed from the center of the crowd, making the people panic. He pulled out an enlarged spiked boxing glove on the end of what looked like a rocket launcher. I love the smell of burning coffee and people in the morning. He pointed his weapon at the cafe while the people scrambled away from the lunatic. Suddenly his gun was ripped out of his hands by some invisible force and crumpled into a ball like it was paper. Okay. That wasn't supposed to happen. The villain was then thrown up into the air, then down, then up over and over again until finally he was slammed rather painfully on the concrete. Ow! The citizens' eyes glanced around wondering where the hero that was doing this was, but to their surprise there wasn't one. Uncle! 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 The big head killer was rapidly spinning on the ground against his will. The friction of being grinded against concrete tearing his mask and suit. He was then thrown painfully against the wall of a building, rendering him unconscious, while the bricks and metal moved around him to pin his body in place until the authorities arrived. The people were in awe over what transpired, some even recorded it on their phones. They unfortunately didn't know who to thank for stopping the maniac. To them it seemed like it must have done by an unknown citizen. So that's how it starts? Ochako mumbled to herself as she watched. She of course was the only one who knew what happened. Izuku used his powers to stop the villain anonymously. This was all part of his plan. Step 1 was give the villains of society an edge. Izuku did this by selling his knowledge of the hero's quirks and abilities to various criminal groups and circles in the underground. With this information, the villains were now posing more of threat. That was the part of the plan she didn't like, but also understood that it was necessary. Now the next step had begun. Giving the people the idea that they didn't need heroes and could defend themselves. 1 week later. The government, in response to the uprising of villain activity and vigilante behavior, has started funding the Geonosis Titan robots. Aizawa read aloud the article given to him by the principal. So they are going ahead with those anti-villain robots? Midnight said. Geonosis is trying to make up for the interning a villain and accidentally giving him resources to complete his weapon, Nizu explained. So we should start expecting a bunch of walking bucket heads roaming the streets on patrol? Snipe commented. Yes, but you have to admit it's a smart move, and with these robot reinforcements it should help restore faith in heroes and help the government regain control. Nizu applauded Geonosis and the government for this strategic move. I thought this meeting was to discuss what's to be done about the growing protesters outside the school, Aizawa complained. The students are having trouble leaving the grounds and I'm starting to get fed up. Well, we sent Cementos out there to peacefully ask them to disperse, Nizu said, hoping his colleague could placate them. Outside. Please disperse. We understand that you have a right to protest, but you are obstructing the students from entering and exiting the academy. Cementos said, standing between the protesters and the school's main entrance. While many shouted and argued, in the back of the crowd a figure dressed in a baggy hooded coat with his hands in his pockets watched with amusement. They sent Cementos out? He smirked as he removed his left hand from the pocket, revealing the golden gauntlet that he was hiding. You're making this too easy, Udata. The red reality stone glowed brightly, unnoticed by anyone. As the protesters continued to yell at the teacher, suddenly pillars of concrete shot out of the ground between them. The people panicked and scattered at the display of force coming from the Udata staff. Everyone was surprised by the threat of violence, and the media would be sure to eat it up. Cementos was shocked. He didn't know what just happened, but he definitely did not activate his quirk. He would never use it towards innocent civilians, protesters or not. Izuku just smirked before walking away nonchalantly. His imitation of the teacher's quirk would only incite more outrage. not just at U.A, but heroes in general. Which is just what he wanted. He pushed all the right buttons and now was the time to reap the rewards. Prime Minister's office. Akira Toriyama, the current Prime Minister of Japan, was heading back to his office. He had just finished a meeting with his defense committee and a representative of Geonosis Tech. The Titan robots were reviewed, approved, and orders were given to begin mass production of them. Within a week the country would have its first legion of mechanical law enforcers. Hopefully that will help decrease the rising villain attacks. It wasn't just villain attacks that were on the rise. Due to several instances where random unknown civilians were starting to fight back against villains when the heroes were not around to save them, and in some cases while heroes were around. Just when things couldn't get worse, now the population was beginning to think that the laws on quirk usage didn't apply to them anymore and were starting to act on it. If this continued, if faith and assurance in heroes wasn't restored, then the government could have a revolution on their hands. When he walked into his main office he noticed the lights were turned off, which was odd. Akira also noticed that his aides were not around. Ignoring the bad feeling in his gut he walked inside. "Good evening, Prime Minister Toriyama," a voice said in the darkness as the door locked behind him. The lights quickly switched on, revealing someone sitting in his chair. As it spun around he finally got a good look at who it was. Izuku Midoriya, the current most wanted person in the country. "Don't bother calling for help," the boy said as fear surged through the minister. "Or I'll bring this entire building down before you can even finish your sentence." "What do you want?" Toriyama sweated as he stayed rooted to the middle of his office. "I'd like you to join me for a little meeting." He opened portal right next to the minister. "I promise no harm will come to you. I just want you to hear me out." "Where are you taking me?" the Prime Minister questioned while staring at the open portal nervously. "It would be better for you not to know." Izuku gestured towards the warp gate. "After you." The minister swallowed his anxiety. The team knew that he would go along. Toriyama was known for buckling under pressure. The only reason he kept office was because how compliant the citizens once were. Everyone cared more about heroes than they did politics anymore. Hesitantly the man stepped through the portal, entering what looked like some sort of warehouse. "Prime Minister Toriyama?" a middle-aged woman greeted. "So he got you too. President Takahashi?" There sat at a long metal table the president of the Hero Public Safety Commission, Kiko Takahashi. "The little brat broke into my office and told me to come with him or he'd demolish my entire department building with everyone in it with snap of his fingers," she grimaced. "Naturally I had to go along." "That's right." Izuku gestured to the only other chair at the table and the Prime Minister slowly and cautiously made his way to the seat. "Now I'm sure you're both wondering why you're here." Seeing that they remained silent he explained. "You're both here because you two, the Prime Minister of Japan and the President of the Hero Public Safety Commission, are the highest authorities in our wonderful nation. You two are the only ones who can give heroes direct orders that they have to follow as long as it doesn't endanger civilian lives. Isn't that right? What do you want?" Miss Takahashi, being the bolder of the two politicians, asked. Izuku merely grinned and waved his hand. From another table several files were lifted into the air and dropped in front of the Prime Minister and President. "I just want you two to listen to my proposition." He moved to stand on the other side of the table from them. "Then you're both free to go. I promise to put you back where I took you two from, unharmed and in one piece." After a long anxious silence Toriyama finally spoke after wiping the sweat from his brow. "All right, let's hear it then." "Elsewhere." "Again Mom, I'm fine," Ochako told her mother through the phone. "I got a part-time job at a hero agency. They're going to sponsor when I apply to another hero school." She frowned having to lie to her parents like this, but it was necessary. Izuku told her that it was easier to lie than have to explain what was really going on and make them understand. "Love you too, bye." They would understand eventually. Izuku assured her that everyone, even her friends at U.A, would come to understand that everything happening was necessary. This hero society was horribly flawed. If psychopaths like Bakugo were allowed to get away with everything, just because they had stronger quirks, while people like Izuku and herself who only wanted to do the right thing were discarded. It wasn't right that people like that got everything they wanted. The world shouldn't be that way, and with Izuku's plan coming together, it wouldn't be like that for long. Abandoned warehouse. "You're insane," the president of the Hero Public Safety Commission said. "Am I?" Izuku questioned. "Because I want to run the hero system better than you two possibly could, so I must be crazy? What makes you think the hero system is flawed and broken?" the Prime Minister asked. "Oh, so you haven't told him?" Izuku smirked, looking to Miss Takahashi. "Told me what?" Toriyama looked to her as well. That's enough, she argued in a poor attempt to change the subject. We're not here to discuss me. That's where you're wrong, President Takahashi, the green-haired boy chuckled. This has everything to do with you and your cover UPS. He grabbed another series of files from the table and tossed it in front of the Prime Minister. What she's attempting to hide, Minister Toriyama, is the multiple failures by heroes as well as the kind of people some of these heroes really are. This is the stuff that the media doesn't report on. He grabbed another file, this one containing secret information on Endeavor, and handed it to him. Read the part about his wife and firstborn son. My God, Akira gasped as he read through what that man did to his own family. And he's the #2 hero. Why was this kept from me and out of the public? You have to understand, the president of the HPSC began. Public faith in heroes is vital to our system. If we lose that, then you lose complete control, Izuku finished for her. Which is what is happening right now. Because of you, she argued, pointing her finger at him. You're the one making everything we built fall apart. I like how you just blatantly admitted to fostering this flawed system, Izuku fired back. All I did was show the world where the cracks in your pathetic foundation are. You're the one who allowed those cracks to stay and grow. He stood up from his seat, making the two of them tense for a moment. Let me ask you something. What was your plan for when All Might eventually retired? They both just stared at him blankly. He's but a mere mortal man, he can't be a hero forever. What were you going to do when your symbol of peace's time ends? Better yet, what would have happened if he died fighting All for One? The Prime Minister didn't even have an answer to that. They had gotten so used to All Might always being this unbeatable deterrent against villains that they had never considered a future without him. No matter how you look at it, the time of All Might reigning supreme is over. This country is going to need something new to keep the balance and peace. I'm offering an easy solution to it. What makes you think we need or want your help? President Takahashi continued to reject him. I'll have you know we have a plan to bring about order and are on the verge of implementing it. You mean the Titan robots? Izuku suddenly said, surprising them. Did Geonosis not tell you? Makes sense, they are probably trying to distance themselves from me as much as possible after what I did. Seeing the confusion, he showed them another file. This one being the online article from the expo some time ago. I was the one who designed those robots, I even had a large hand in their programming. The two gasped when they realized the implications of what he could do. That's right, your new ace in the hole, I know all the ins and outs of. I could simply tell the villains how to beat them, or I could even tell the villains how to reprogram them. Izuku smirked at the two politicians. Imagine it. The robots come to help the heroes save the day, only for the Titans to suddenly turn on their superiors. You and Geonosis would have a lot of egg on your face, wouldn't you? He kept talking while they were sweating bullets now. It might even be the spark that triggers a full-scale rebellion. Now the heroes are fighting vigilantes, civilians, robots, and villains in five-way war. Then boom, end of society as we know it. And it would be your doing, Miss Takahashi said accusingly. Is that what you want? Total collapse of our society? Please. I keep telling you I want to fix society, not destroy it, Izuku explained. Yes, I shook the walls a bit, but that was just to prove my point about how flawed it really is, and it worked. People are starting to see heroes in a different light. They're no longer these infallible gods that enforce laws and peace. We need to do something about it soon. By giving you what you want? Takahashi spat. Listen here, President Takahashi, Izuku leaned towards her over the table. I'll get what I want one way or another. The only reason this offer is even on the table is because I want to try a peaceful solution first with the least amount of violence and bloodshed. He leaned back and held his arms out. By all means, say no, refuse my offer. It won't matter in the end. I'll just side with the villains and together we'll win this war. I'll rebuild society from scratch and you two will go down in history as minor nuisances that tried to hinder me and failed. After a scary moment of silence, the Prime Minister finally spoke. What would you do? He asked. If we give you what you're asking for, what would you do next? Prime Minister. Takahashi exclaimed. You're not seriously considering giving in to this monster. That's enough. We agreed to hear him out, didn't we? The Prime Minister reminded her. Indeed you did, Izuku spoke. Now then, let me share with you my vision. 1 week later, Todoroki household. I'm leaving now for Yumi. Endeavor's loud voice boomed. Where are you going? The only girl of the siblings asked. The Prime Minister and the Public Safety Commission asked me to attend an announcement, the hero grumbled. Some big new change in hero policy, at least they thought of him and not All Might. That's one small victory over that man. Where's Shoto? He left. Fuyumi glanced away from her father. Endeavor frowned disapprovingly. His masterpiece was acting even worse lately. It was one thing to silently hate him, at least the boy was improving his abilities, but now Shoto was actively defying. He even went so far as to threaten his own father. A few weeks ago he told his son to go back to training and to cut back on visiting his mother in the hospital. Shoto's response was a promise to give his father a scar that matched his own, if he ever tried to keep his mother away from him again. The boy even refused training. Why do I need training from someone so pathetic that he settled for second place and pushed his ambitions onto others? Those were Shoto's exact words on the matter. Then he strolled away from his father without a second glance. Endeavor had never wanted to strike his son more than ever after that sentence left his mouth. That unruly boy should count himself lucky that he lives at Udata. Endeavor quietly fumed as he headed outside where his escort was waiting. Getting into the long black car, he headed to the Senate building where the announcement from the Prime Minister is to take place in 2 hours. During the drive he allowed himself to think back on the big reveal concerning All Might a while back. When had first seen the hero's true form on television as well as Apotheosis's words about how he was actually quirkless, at first he didn't believe it. Then he got angry. All these years he was competing against a quirkless man and lost to him over and over again. After his rage simmered down he started thinking about it, rationalized and then delighted in the revelation. It meant that All Might's power was finite. It meant that he was beatable. For once the future looked clear. All Might can and will be surpassed and his own son will be the one to do it. Geonosis production factory. Alarms were blaring. The staff was in a panic. Out of nowhere the hundreds of new Titan models that were ready for transportation suddenly activated. The programmers tried to regain control, but the Nexus field, an invisible Wi-Fi network that connected them to the robots through various satellites, wasn't responding to them. It was like the Titans were ignoring their orders no matter what coded commands they typed into the computers that ran their AI. "What do we do?" one of them shouted from the control room. "We can't let them leave, but the armored shutters won't hold for long. The emergency fail-safe protocol." Another Geonosis programmer suddenly remembered. It was supposed to be used in situations like this. An unstoppable command protocol that would shut down all robots in case of a hack. It was suggested by some intern, surprisingly enough, back when the Titan was still in the prototype phases. That's right. They quickly began typing into the keyboard, accessing and using that very protocol. Wait, one of the engineers quickly remembered something very important. Wait. All of a sudden all their computer screens went black. A loud slam noise was heard outside, signaling the armored shutters being automatically opened. "I was trying to tell you, the one who designed the emergency fail-safe protocol was Izuku Midoriya." They all paled. The villain that the company brought in as an intern without knowing. The very villain that used their resources to create a device that gave him supreme power. Right on cue an image appeared on their monitors. A skull and crossbones that had green fluffy hair and freckles. The image laughed an emotionless robotic laugh that unnerved the men in the control room. Oh dear God, the anti-villain robots were loose and under his control now. They couldn't even call to warn anyone as their phones had been cut off by the encrypted virus that they accidentally ran through the systems. No one would know about the Titans until it was too late. Japanese Senate building, 2 hours later. "Good afternoon everyone." Prime Minister Toriyama stood at the podium with the president of the HPSC standing next to him looking nervous and apprehensive. "I thank you all for coming here," he said into the microphone. Even he looked a bit anxious. "As you know, our country is in the midst of a crisis. Villains are running wild, civilians are losing faith in heroes, and vigilante activity is on the rise." He didn't have to look at the crowd to see the look of silent agreement on their faces. "Myself and my administration have identified the source of these problems." The man briefly scowled at the number 2 hero in the crowd, remembering all the information that was kept from him on the hot head. "The problem is we've become too compliant on the behaviors and faults of our heroes. We've become so dependent on All Might that we've let our standards for heroes slowly decline over the years." Endeavor looked around the outdoor conference. That fact that they were having this outside was odd. They usually have these inside the Senate building, not outside in front of it. Another thing he noticed was that he was the only hero invited to this announcement. He stood off to the side of the large crowd of officials, reporters and journalists. "That ends today. With the help of the Senate we've decided to establish a new department that will review, manage and in some cases suspend hero activity in our country." The Prime Minister paused to let that sink in. Murmurs spread throughout the crowd. This Department of Hero Regulation will have power and authority equal to and to a certain extent greater than the Hero Public Safety Commission. The president of the commission flinched a bit when he said that. It is our hope that we can bring about a new golden age, with heroes truly worthy of that title. The crowd sounded pleased to hear this. It seems they were all in support of this idea. It was then that Prime Minister Toriyama swallowed nervously. Now as for who will be the director of this new program. It is someone that may come as a bit of shock to you, but I assure everyone that he is fully qualified and ready to take this position. Endeavor allowed himself a small smirk, believing that they were referring to him. Why else would they invite him to this time-wasting announcement? May I present to you all? The Prime Minister waited for them all to become completely silent. The first director of the new Hero Regulation Department, Endeavor, stood up. Izuku Midoriya. A portal suddenly opened behind the man and out walked the green-haired teen dressed in an immaculate gray suit, tie to match his hair, and a specifically tailored left sleeve that revealed his Infinity Gauntlet for everyone to see. The publicly known villain walked up to the podium while the Prime Minister stepped aside. Thank you for that introduction, Prime Minister Toriyama. Izuku smiled as he lowered the podium a few inches with his powers. The crowd erupted into roars and shouts. They knew who Midoriya was after. Everyone knew Midoriya. After all, he was the one to expose All Might's weakness to the world. The infamous villain with the Golden Gauntlet, as they called him. Also known as Apotheosis by the police and heroes. That's enough. The Prime Minister grabbed one of the mics from the podium. Everyone calm down and let me explain. The crowd slowly regained control of their volume and calmed themselves. Now I know this is shocking, but Midoriya here has proven himself and his intentions to me. He truly wishes to dedicate himself to improving the hero system, he argued to the public. For those reasons, along with his immense intellect and great power, I've granted him a full pardon for his crimes along with political immunity. And I thank you for giving me amnesty. Izuku smirked again. I promise you won't regret this. He was cut off from speaking any further when a ball of fire was hurled at him. Luckily he reacted in time and opened a portal to send it somewhere else. How rude. What the kind of farce is this? Endeavor yelled as he stomped through the crowd. We had no choice, Toriyama defended. This was the best option to end the chaos. By letting a villain run your new department. Endeavor argued back. Does the Senate know you did this? It doesn't matter if they know or not, the Prime Minister glared at the hero. While I needed their approval to create this department, I can hire whoever I want to run it. You know, attacking your new manager is grounds for disciplinary actions, Izuku said with condescension. If you don't back down, then I will have to exercise my full authority. You're a villain, the worst kind. Endeavor spat. You don't have any authority, the boy just smirked wider. The entire crowd quickly started backing away, leaving a large open space between the hero and the stage. Even the Prime Minister and the other government officials backed away to stand behind their security detail. Toriyama frowned, seeing where this was going. Flashback. So we have an agreement then? Izuku smiled as he shook the Prime Minister's hand. I can't believe you're going along with this. President Takahashi glared at him, but she no longer had a say in the matter. She hated to admit it, but Midoriya had them boxed into the point where they had no other option than to give in to his demands. At the very least, they would be able to closely watch his actions from here on out. We have no choice. It's either this or all-out war that will end with our side losing everything and his gaining it all. Toriyama sighed in displeasure. He didn't like this either, but maybe this boy would do some good. His ideas seemed like they could work. They'll just have to wait and see how he implemented them and hope nothing terrible came from this alliance. So when do you plan on making the announcement? Izuku asked. Give me a week to run it by the Senate first, the Prime Minister promised him. If it comes down to it, I can make it an executive order if they don't comply, but I have a feeling they will. Excellent, he walked around the table. Oh, and one more thing. Just to make sure I can trust you, I want you to invite a specific hero to the announcement, and make sure it's outdoors. Who? Miss Takahashi wondered why he would want a hero to attend such a thing. I want Endeavor to be there alone, with other hero present. The gauntlet user wanted that man to be present for multiple reasons. What are you going to do to him? The Prime Minister asked with trepidation. Absolutely nothing, Izuku vowed. If he does nothing, that is. Though if he does try something, then I want to publicly make an example out of him. I won't kill him, don't worry. Just think of this as a test for Endeavor, he smiled a bit deviously. A test to see if a great hero can accept change for the better of society. He knew he wouldn't, but Izuku didn't tell them that. Flashback end. Since All Might is too soft, I'll do what he failed to do and bring you down. Endeavor declared loudly. Very well, Izuku closed his eyes and sighed with disappointment while secretly elated on the inside. You brought this on yourself. Endeavor was about to charge forward and burn the arrogant little bastard when he felt a large metallic hand grab his shoulder. He barely had time to turn his head when he was socked hard in the face by a metal fist. The flaming hero was sent flying for a moment, blood dripping from his face. What the hell? Endeavor didn't have to wonder what hit him for long, as there stood a big red slim-built robot. Not just one but 3 identical ones stood there facing him, making low metallic growling noise. Ladies and gentlemen, my present to you. Izuku began with a gleeful smile on his face. The new and improved, mass-produced, and ready for battle Titans. He successfully broke into Geonosis's computers several hours ago and completely reprogrammed their AI to follow his orders and his orders only. It was easy since he placed a bunch of back doors, hidden in the files, back when he worked as an intern for them. Izuku also knew that the robots were too good to not continue making, hence why he designed them for the company. He waited until the factory had a finished fully working legion ready to go, ran his usurpation program, and now he had a robotic army at his command. I think a demonstration is in order. Izuku glared down at Endeavor from his position on the stage. Boys, take him down. The robots responded with another growl as confirmation and began to stalk towards the hero. Do you really believe a few tin cans can match up to me? The flame user taunted arrogantly. He then blasted the 3 titans with a torrent of fire. Luckily, all those who attended this event had retreated to a safe distance. Thinking that would be enough, he turned to face Midoriya again, only to freeze when the machines walked out of the fire undamaged. I probably should have mentioned, Izuku chuckled. Geonosis was never able to produce a titan that possessed every feature that I designed, so to make up for this they created various models for various different scenarios and enemies. He gently leaned forward over his podium. These are the fire-proof models, designed specifically to defeat fire quirk users. The robots were making their way closer to their target. You could say these titans were made to beat you, Endeavor. That's not possible. The hero was silenced when he was forced to dodge the first titan that tried to make a swipe at him. These things were pretty fast. He was so distracted by one that he forgot about the other 2. The second titan flanked him from the left and attempted to punch him in the face again. This time Endeavor blocked with both arms to minimize the damage. That proved to be a mistake, as the third titan delivered a devastating punch to his stomach that had him hacking up his lunch. Using his flames he launched himself, trying to get some distance and figure out his next move, but the robots just kept coming. Wonderful, aren't they? Izuku gloated. They don't hesitate, they don't second-guess their next move. They simply move to follow orders and won't stop until I tell them to. He was really enjoying this. It couldn't have worked out any better for him. The best part was that this was all legal. With his new position, Endeavor was the one breaking the law by publicly attacking and threatening a government superior. You might want to get a close-up on this, he said to the only cameraman left on the corner of the stage who was filming this all live. Meanwhile, a staff lounge. The secrets of my quirk are too dangerous to be revealed to the world. All Might was busy going over his speech cards. He had planned to make a public announcement soon, to help settle some of tension towards him caused by the secrets Midoriya revealed some time ago. Nizu suggested it, telling him that his silence was only making the situation between civilian and hero relations more problematic. He planned to rectify some of things that boy said and explain the situation and his need for secrecy for the good of society. Hey! Aizawa barged into the room with the principal latched onto his shoulder. Answer your damn phone. The normally stoic hero was frantic, which was highly out of character for him. I turned it off. I'm a bit busy at the moment. The skeletal man frowned at his fellow teacher's aura of urgency. Turn on the T.V. Nizu shouted while hopping from the dark-haired man to grab the remote to the large-screen television set up on the wall across from them. There's something big happening that you need to see. The screen flipped on, as the small white creature turned to a random news channel. It didn't matter which, as this announcement was going out live on all news channels. What's this about? Toshinori asked. Look. Aizawa pointed at the screen. There was Midoriya dressed in a nice suit on a stage in front of the Senate building. What the? Toshinori's sunken eyes widened to a nearly impossible size. The Prime Minister has established a new department of heroics, Nizu explained. Guess who he put in charge of it? This doesn't make any sense. Toshinori shouted. How could this happen? Why would the Prime Minister just hand something like this to him on a silver platter? It makes perfect sense, the principal said. Based off what Midoriya has said, this is exactly what he wants. A position of power and authority in the hero system. This is bad, Izawa commented. They watched as Endeavor stood up to Midoriya and even attempted to attack him only to be punched in the face by a big familiar robot. Seeing this, All Might buffed himself up with great difficulty as he had already used up most of his time training students today. What do you think you're doing? Nizu asked. At top speed I can get there in 15 minutes, he was about to leap through the window when Erasure Head stopped him by erasing his quirk. And what good will that do? Izawa questioned. You know what he's capable of and you see the position he's in. Going there will only play into Midoriya's hand. Do you expect me to just sit here while this happens? Toshinori pointed to the screen where Endeavor was fighting a group of machines. Yes, Izawa didn't like it either. Attacking a government authority figure is a serious offense. Exactly, Nizu looked concerned as well. It seems Midoriya has positioned himself perfectly. No hero can make a move against him now. Back at the Senate building. Damn it. Endeavor still tried to use his flames even though it was useless against these titans. They soon surrounded the hero. Launching himself in the air, he thought that would give him the advantage, until one of the robots fired a tether that wrapped around his leg and yanked him back down to the ground. He tried to use momentum and gravity to his advantage, by crashing his fist into one of Machine's head, but its reaction timing was too good. It grabbed his arm with both hands and twisted, snapping the hero's bones. Gah! Endeavor roared in pain as his arm was broken. He was then thrown to the feet of the other two titans who proceeded to rain blows down on the man. People of Japan, Izuku began as the hero was repeatedly beaten by his robots. Do you see this? This is the second greatest hero, directly under All Might, he spoke into the microphone. A hero who only cares about himself. A hero who torments his own family for his own ambitions. A hero who thinks of his job as nothing more than a competition that he needs to be the best at, the green-haired teen continued as said hero was pummeled before him. Your great All Might is just a frail man who lies to the world, and Endeavor is a man who callously tore apart his own family just to be the best. He then held his hands out. Are these your heroes? He looked towards the camera, asking everyone in the world what they thought of these two once great men. All right boys, that enough, he commanded the robots to stop and they did. Endeavor was barely conscious, laying in a bloody heap on the ground. Not a single security officer, journalist, or official stepped in to help him. Everyone, even the Prime Minister, just stood there and watched. Bring him to me. Izuku watched the Titans grab Endeavor and drag his beaten, bruised body up to the stage. When he reprogrammed the robots and sent this particular set of models to this location, he made sure to upload them with all the data he collected on the Flame user. His quirk, moves, techniques, and fighting style. The man didn't stand a chance against Midoriya's intellect. Kneeling please, he ordered, and without hesitation the Titans forced Endeavor to his knees while keeping his arms locked behind him. You, little bastard, Endeavor hissed as his vision stopped blurring. For attacking a government official, as well as your atrocious behavior and deplorable treatment of your family, I'm removing you from the hero system. Izuku smirked down at him. You won't get away with this, the flame wielder growled. The boy leaned in close and whispered so no one but the two of them would hear this. I already have. Izuku stepped back and held out his gauntlet-covered hand. Consider yourself fired. He chuckled at his pun as the soul stone glowed in the palm of his hand. Izuku then grabbed Endeavor by the face with a satisfied smile as neon purple veins spread across the hero's head and then the rest of his body. Endeavor screamed and thrashed in pain as the stone did its job. A few moments later it was over and the veins retreated. Izuku removed his gauntlet, watching the flames that masked the hero's face and shrouded his body permanently fizzled out. He waved the robots off to take the unconscious former hero away. Civilians, officers, heroes and villains, Izuku looked towards the camera again. This is the beginning of a new era. He gave a smile to the camera, a warm welcoming one this time. This one was directed towards All Might, who he knew had to be watching this. His smile conveyed a message to the number one hero. A simple message. Only two simple words. I win. I'm actually kind of surprised over the population's opinion on this, Ochako said while going through the information on her phone. She was dressed nice while sitting next to Izuku in the back of a limousine. A large majority seems to be accepting of you, or at least open to the idea of you and your new position, while the others are completely against it. I'd say it's about 50-50. The quirkless minority are definitely on my side, but the rest are only warming up to me due to their loss in faith towards heroes and All Might. Izuku leaned on one arm as he stared out the window of the moving car. They'll understand soon enough. Taking Endeavor's quirk was just the beginning. Now the flawed corrupt heroes will know that the consequences are real and very severe. Soon we will be able to give the people the heroes they need and deserve. What happens after that? Ochako asked him. Well, eventually I plan on having my new department absorb the Hero Public Safety Commission, Izuku explained. Then in 3 or 4 decades I'll become Prime Minister of Japan and have complete and total control over the society and be able to implement whatever laws I want. This just seems so surreal, Ochako smiled. Now you know how I felt when I first put the gauntlet on, he smiled back at her, then looked down at his device. Anything I desire I can make a reality. The funny thing is, if I decided to be an evil villain, this whole country would be in ruins by now. You would never do that though, the brown-haired girl corrected. Of course not, Izuku said without hesitation. I have no wish to hurt innocent people. The car turned into a familiar neighborhood. Though that didn't stop me from having to hurt the most important person to me, he sighed sadly as the limousine stopped at an apartment building. Izuku stayed put in his seat while he worked up the courage to do this. Are you going or not? She asked. It's funny, I haven't felt fear since before the gauntlet, Izuku chuckled dryly. Yet here I am, scared of meeting one person. Finding his resolve, he opened the door and stepped out of the car. Walking up the stairs, he made his way to a door that he knew by heart. Izuku stopped in front of it, then worked up the nerve to knock on the door with his gauntlet-covered hand. A moment later he heard the deadbolt unlock and the door slowly opened, revealing an older woman with features close to his own. Hi Mom, Izuku smiled warmly at the sight of his mother. What would she say to him? Would she be angry? Would she scream at him? Izuku? The woman immediately grabbed him in a hug. I guess I have some explaining to do. Izuku hugged her back while she sobbed into his shoulder. Don't I? A faculty meeting. How is this my fault? Toshinori shouted over the rest of the teachers. If you just gave quirkless people a shred of respect and dignity, then we wouldn't be in this mess in the first place. Aizawa yelled back at him. But no, you let your power and position go to your head and became just like the rest of the arrogant, egotistical bastards who look down on those who are weaker. Eraserhead was furious. Part of him could understand a bit of what Midoriya went through. His own quirk was very impractical and people used to belittle and look down on him for it. He knew exactly how it felt on the bottom. All the rage, the despair, and the pain that came with it. Izuku though was smart enough to actually take his pain and channel it into ambition. And look what it did for him. Choosing who's weak, who's strong, who can be a hero, who is worthy to pass one for all to. Like some sort of god among men. In what way does that make you different than all for one? The gaunt man's eyes widened in shock and anger that his colleague would dare compare him to his worst enemy and greatest villain of all time in any way. That's enough, Aizawa. Nizu shouted, stopping them before the argument got too far. Though judging by the look on Toshinori's face it seems that line was already crossed. I'm no different though, Aizawa sighed before looking away. I've expelled and transferred students that I judged as unworthy of being heroes. However, I at least gave them a chance first, and with that he stormed out of the meeting having said what he needed to say. Well, that was something. Midnight slowly fanned herself with her hand. She had never seen Shoyuta get so emotional in all the years she's known him, and it honestly got her a little hot and bothered. I think we should be focusing on what Midoriya is planning to do next, Snipe chimed in, reminding everyone what they were originally arguing about. We tried that, Vlad King scoffed. Everyone tried that and he still stayed ahead of us. What makes you think we can figure out what goes on in that twisted little head of his? I hate to say it, but he's right, Nizu said. Midoriya has positioned himself perfectly. As a government department director, no hero or law officer can touch him. While they were sitting here bickering, Midoriya was already scheming and making move after move to cement his new power and authority. You seem nervous, sir, Cementos noticed the trembling pause. Indeed I am, Nizu frowned. In all the years of heroism, not a single villain has ever infiltrated our government. The white animal looked around at his fellow educators. They certainly tried, but were always immediately rooted out before they got too far. Izuku Midoriya is the first to accomplish this. There's an upside to this though, isn't there? Toshinori asked. Yes, with his position he'll be under close watch and scrutiny, the principal explained. If he's caught doing anything illegal it would be grounds for getting him removed and indeed arrested. Yeah, but how do you about arresting someone who possesses an Infinity Gauntlet? Snipe wondered. The kid took down Endeavor 3 days ago and no one's seen him since, Vlad King reminded everyone. Not only was the hero missing, his agency was shut down and the media was spreading some rather concerning and damning things about him. Midoriya was obviously behind it, and every hero in the country was either too shocked or too scared to speak out against his actions. He's vastly more dangerous than we originally thought. He's right, Toshinori actually shook when he remembered what he saw on the news 3 days ago. The way he touched the number 2 hero's head, and the effect it had on him. He'd seen this act only once before from another villain. The most dangerous villain to ever exist. From his point of view, Izuku took Endeavor's quirk. Crystallized replications of quirks harvested from DNA, those were the words Midoriya used. Not only that, but All for One helped the boy and gave him all the information he needed on One for All. He must have given Midoriya a sample of his own DNA so he could replicate that man's despicable quirk. That's why All for One was so smug sitting in his prison cell. He knew that Izuku was in possession of both their quirks. He still needed to confirm it, but he was positive that's what happened. He shuddered at the knowledge. Izuku Midoriya now wielded All for One and One for All together. For the first time in his life, Toshinori had no idea what to do. He was supposed to be the number 1 hero and yet he couldn't find a solution to stop Midoriya. The boy was just too powerful now, and worse, it was all Toshinori's fault. Aizawa was right about him. He didn't even know Izuku yet. He assumed he was powerless to not only protect himself but protect others. To be fair, there had never been a quirkless hero before, but he knew now that Izuku had the brains and determination to do it. Perhaps I was arrogant and egotistical, Toshinori thought ruefully. Midoriya home. I know what I'm doing and what I did do seems extreme, but it's all necessary, Izuku explained to his mother while they sat across from each other at the kitchen table. He had just finished going over when he came up with the idea for the gauntlet, the 10 months spent helping criminals in the underground, his time with the League of Villains, his plan to get into the government, and all the events leading up to this moment. He told her everything, well, almost everything. Izuku had left out the part where he helped the hero killer bop off a few heroes. He may not have actually dealt the killing blows, but he'd rather not make his mom cry again. I get that, sweetie, but why does it have to be you? Inko asked. Because no one else will do it, Izuku said sadly. Everyone is content to live in this corrupt world. There are people who thinks it's unfair, but they're not willing to do anything about it. He was referring to the quirkless people like himself, but it wasn't their fault that they've been convinced that they are powerless. The only other person who also sees what's wrong with society and wants to change it is a serial killer. Can you imagine a psychopath wielding the Infinity Gauntlet? It would be a disaster. He at least had some morals. Unlike most villains, he had no desire to kill those he hated. In truth, he was the best person to change the hero-based society. But couldn't you have been a hero with this invention of yours? His mother asked the question that many wanted to know. Izuku actually chuckled lightly at that. You know, Mom. That was what I originally wanted to do, he smiled fondly, remembering his old naive hero-obsessed self. I was planning to use the Infinity Gauntlet to become a hero, partly out of spite against All Might and Bakugo, but then, he paused with a sigh. I started to see and learn things. I worked with various criminals in the underground and learned a lot about the world and heroes. Inko gasped, hearing her son again confess to actually working with such bad people. I found out how corrupt the heroes truly are, and when I was hired by the League of Villains I learned how deep All Might's lies run. Izuku looked at his mother. How could I be a part of such a terrible system? So I figured, why not change it, bring all the corruption to light and make a better world. Izuku, Inko began, but he continued. I'm not asking you to forgive or support me, Mom. I just want you to understand. He waited for her response. Izuku, you know I love you very much. Inko wiped her eyes as they started to water. I really don't like all this destruction and antagonizing the heroes, but if this is what you wish to do, then I'll support you in any way that I can. Izuku smiled and gently took her hand. You don't have to. I have everything I need for what comes next in my plan, but thank you. Just you saying that is enough for me. There was a knock at the front door and Izuku went to go get it. On that note, I have a gift for you, Mom. He swung the door open, revealing Ochako standing next to a tall black Titan robot. Hi, the brown-haired girl shyly greeted the woman. I'm Ochako Uraraka. I'm a friend of Izuku's and I work with him. She's the first member of my new department, Izuku clarified. And this, he gestured to the robot standing silently, is a Titan that I modified just for you. I reprogrammed and added a few extra features, Izuku explained, gesturing for the robot to come inside. The machine did so, bending forward to make its way through the door. Oh my, Inko backed away from the big scary-looking metal man. Like everyone else, she too had seen what these things did to Endeavor 3 days ago. It's all right, Izuku promised. It's perfectly safe, I promise. The Titan stepped closer to the woman, got down on one knee and bowed towards her. He's programmed to protect you and follow any order you give him. Why are you giving me this? Inko wondered why she would need such a thing in her home. I'm not going to sugarcoat this, Mom. Izuku went from smiling fondly to a serious expression. There's going to be a lot of people coming after me. Not just villains, but heroes and maybe even police. Very soon will they realize how fruitless that will be. He looked down at his gauntlet. When that happens, they'll come after you to hurt me. It was harsh, but it was the honest truth. He wouldn't put it past villains to stoop that low. It was what they did best. However, the corrupt heroes of society would also do the same when pushed to desperation. He'd rather cover that base right now, as he still cared very deeply for his mother. This Titan is equipped with a scanner that detects quirks up to a specific radius and will let me know of any serious threat that approaches this neighborhood. At first, certain government officials and police heads tried to give him a hassle for using an expensive machine for a personal matter, but he quickly shut them up by pointing out their own hypocrisy. He told them that he was using a robot that was designed and built to protect civilians to protect a civilian. If they had a problem with that, then Izuku subtly threatened to let the people know that their so-called law enforcement and government had no interest in protecting their lives from danger, or at the very least let one robot protect the only remaining family member of a government director. What they and his mother won't know is that he was going to have at least 5 more Titans constantly patrolling the surrounding area. That's sweet of him. Ochako smiled, seeing that he genuinely cared for his mom and went this far to ensure her safety. He even promised to do the same for her parents when they eventually make her employment in his department public. I don't know what to say. Inko looked from her son to the robot still bowing in her hallway. You don't have to say anything, Izuku smiled again. Consider this part of my apology. Thank you, Izuku. She hugged her son again. He was surprised with how accepting she was of this situation. He guessed that having her son back was enough for her. Dorms. Katsuki stared at the image on the computer screen again. The pictures of Deku from 3 days ago during the Prime Minister's announcement. Everything seemed to be looking up for that nerd. He remembered watching the news and almost choking on his drink during the announcement. How could the government be so weak that it would give a villain shit like Deku a position of power? Kaken, you're looking rather low today, Izuku whispered behind him. Almost like someone knocked you off your high horse. Katsuki whipped around to see Deku sitting there on his bed. I'm surprised you haven't killed yourself yet, since that seems to be your solution for people when they are at their lowest. Shut up. Bakugo snarled at him. This image of Deku wasn't even real. He had already figured that out, yet it still wouldn't go away. Was he losing it? How does it feel to be a failure, Kaken? Does it hurt? Does it sting? Izuku smirked at him. If only you acted like a hero instead of a villain towards me and everyone around you, then maybe this wouldn't have happened. Katsuki slammed his head on his desk, willing this hallucination to go away. Always remember, Kaken, you are the real monster, not me, Deku whispered in his ear before fading away. Bakugo desperately wanted this voice in his head to go away. He figured the only way to make it stop would be to stop the real Deku. However, that was easier said than done. The bastard's gauntlet made him nearly invincible, and being a government-hired director made him untouchable. It seemed taking down Izuku was impossible. Hideout. Shigaraki sat in an abused armchair, repeatedly clawing at the leather arm as he watched the television screen. Every single news channel was talking about that brat. Izuku Midoriya, the former villain apotheosis. The way the media used the words former villain irritated him. As if the kid wasn't still a villain at heart. Though what Shigaraki found truly infuriating was how Izuku became so popular in such a short amount of time. Izuku fought All Might, but so did he. Where was his recognition? Why wasn't the media talking about the League of Villains anymore? Was he so easily outshined by the brat? All these questions were grating on Shigaraki's nerves. Dabi watched his boss silently fume to himself. He was starting to wonder what he was still doing here. Izuku had accomplished so much with little help since he revealed himself to the world along with his gauntlet. He took on All Might to what the media called a standstill. Then went on to persuade the government into giving him a position of power and authority. The kid even went the extra mile, by taking down the number 2 hero. The man that Dabi hated the most. Izuku did it without lifting a finger, he merely sicked his robots on him. It was quite a treat to watch the bastard get beaten down repeatedly and then dragged before Izuku, who did something to him with his gauntlet that put the defeated hero to sleep. What had the League done? A failed attack on a few small acts of terrorism on cities, kidnapped a student from the training camp, which lead to their base getting raided and their real leader defeated by All Might. Now here they were, moving from place to place with no future prospects other than a possible alliance with the Yakuza. How would you like to come work for me? Dabi was starting to seriously consider Izuku's offer. Back then he hadn't gave it much thought, because Izuku only had 3 stones in his gauntlet. It made him powerful, but now with 5 of these weird stones of his he was beyond even that. Maybe he could accomplish more with him than Shigaraki ever could. Buddhisashi. What happened? Endeavor groggily woke up. Opening his eyes he tried to figure out where he was. Judging by the dim lighting, gray walls, and bars it was some sort of prison cell. He concluded that villain kid locked him up somewhere. Does he really think this can hold me? He sneered at the audacity and sat up in the bed. Endeavor then tried to activate his quirk so he could melt the bars, but nothing happened. He tried again to activate Hellflame and still nothing happened. The sound of a loud metal rattling was brought to his attention. Looking outside his cell he saw Izuku Midoriya running his gauntlet against the bars. "Ah, you're awake," Izuku smiled at him through the bars. "What did you do to me?" Endeavor demanded. "I took the one thing you value most," Izuku glared back at him. "The one thing everyone values most in this world. Your quirk. That's not possible." The former hero shouted, face twisted in rage. "Oh, that's a scary face," Izuku mocked as he pulled a small card out of his pocket. It was Endeavor's hero license. "Oh, you're making the same face in your license picture," he snickered holding the license up to compare the images. "That scowl reminds me so much of my dear Kaken." He then ignited the card with Endeavor's own quirk, burning the license to a crisp before tossing the smoldering plastic at the ex-hero's feet. "Your career as a hero is over, Enji Todoroki." He thoroughly enjoyed the look of shock and disbelief on the man's face. "My agency will come after you for this." Endeavor spat. "I know, that's why I shut your agency down." Izuku crossed his arms. "Oh, that's right, you've been asleep for 3 days and don't know what's going on now. Let's just say I can get a lot done in 3 days, he chuckled in amusement. "Do you really think the public will let this slide?" Endeavor figured at least his fans would speak out against this brat. He was the second greatest hero after all. "I've got a question for you." Izuku paced the outside of the cell. "Do you think anyone will give you sympathy now that they found out what you've done?" He stopped to glare at the man through the bars. "How you drove your wife to madness, how you discarded your children when you realized they wouldn't further your ambition." See the ex-hero's shocked and angry gaze, he continued. "Or perhaps the public should know about how you drove your firstborn son Tuya to suicide. You didn't even look for his body. You shut the hell up?" Finally snapping, he stood up on wobbly legs. "No, you shut up." Izuku yelled back. "The public knows the truth about you. They now know that you're not a hero. That someone like you should never be a hero, but don't worry, for you won't be the only hero I retire." "Who are you to decide that?" Endeavor argued. "You're just some quirkless brat with a fancy glove." "Well, this quirkless brat and his fancy glove is powerful enough to put you in your place," Izuku taunted him. "And I wouldn't be insulting quirkless people if I were you. After all, you are one of us now," he smiled widely. "It's not so bad, you'll get used to it." Endeavor looked down at this clenched fist in rage, lamenting how useless he was now. The worst part was that the little bastard sounded proud of what he did to this once great hero. "I don't care how long it takes, but I'll make you pay for this one way or another," Enji Todoroki vowed. "There's a few things I've been meaning to ask you, Endeavor." Izuku ignored the man's petty threats. "Were you always like this?" he asked, stepping closer to the bars. "Let me rephrase that. Did it ever occur to you in your entire career as a hero to simply be a hero? Was this all just a competition to you? A way for you to be the best? Did none of the lives you saved matter to you? Was every person just a point for your scoreboard in this ridiculous imaginary feud with All Might? What else would I do this for?" Todoroki stated. "What would be the point if I'm not the best?" Izuku just frowned in disappointment. Just like Bakugo and all the others, they missed the whole purpose of being a hero. Which was to be a hero. "That's what I thought." Pinching the bridge of his nose with a frustrated sigh, he then slid open the entrance to the cell. "All right then, off you go." He waved at the man to leave. Enji gave him a skeptical look. "You're not a prisoner, Todoroki. You've had your quirk appropriated and your hero license revoked, but you're free to leave. This is your punishment, Enji Todoroki, to live free in the new world, completely powerless to change anything." 2 Black Titan robots came up behind Izuku. "My advice to you is to try and piece back together your shattered family, maybe earn back their love and respect, Have a second chance to be a father for once in your life. It's all you have left now." He smiled pleasantly and turned to his tall robots. "Boys, escort this man out," the Titans growled in confirmation. Endeavor was taken by the arms and walked out of the cells. He didn't put up a fight. What could he do anyway? That little green-haired brat stole his quirk from him and took away his hero license. He was worthless and useless now. The robots escorted him through the police headquarters. Every employee and officer they passed gave him mixed looks. Some looked at the former hero with pity, others looked disgusted. Soon Endeavor was brought to the front entrance. The Titans then roughly pushed him out the doors where a sea of reporters and journalists were waiting. "Endeavor, is it true about what happened to your first son Tuya Todoroki?" One of them asked, shoving a mic close to his face. "Do you feel responsible for his suicide? Why did you lie to the public by saying his death was accidental? Why did you lie and say that your wife moved to the hospital for health issues? Did your agency know all this? Is that why Director Midoriya shut it down?" More and more. The former hero was continuously bombarded by questions and accusations, and for the first time in his life he didn't know how to respond. He was alone and completely powerless. From atop the police headquarters, Izuku watched the man with a satisfied smile on his face. This age of heroes was finally coming to a close, and his new age would spring forth from the ashes of the old. "I should really invest in some nicer suits," Izuku spontaneously remarked, looking down at his cheap jacket and tie. The left sleeve wasn't even properly tailored for his gauntlet, he just ripped it off at the elbow. Not very classy at all. "This one looks nice," Izuku commented as he got a good look at himself in the mirror. He was currently at a fancy high-class garment shop to buy a new suit befitting his new job. This one was a cool gray, with a black button shirt and matching black tie. He really liked it. "Looks good on you, kid," the owner of the shop said. An old mustached man in glasses. "Yes, it does." This was the 10th one he tried on, and so far it was the best. "I'll take this one. In fact, I'd like a couple dozen made, custom tailored for my gauntlet, please." "Excelsior," the man suddenly exclaimed at making such a great sale. "You've been a big help, Mr. Lee," he smiled at the owner. "If you don't mind, I'd like to wear this one out. I've got an important meeting to go to." "Is this how boys feel when they go shopping with their girlfriends?" Ochako dryly asked as she sat in a chair by the mirrors. A miserably bored look plastered on her face that eventually formed after watching him try on 10 suits in a row. "I've never had a girlfriend, so I wouldn't know." Izuku blushed lightly in embarrassment, having realized that she'd been sitting there watching him shop for clothes this whole time. "Sorry for dragging you here, by the way." "It's fine." The brown-haired gravity girl stood up and stretched her stiff back out. She was dressed in a black formal jacket, skirt, fingerless gloves, stockings and shoes. "So what's this important meeting we're going to?" She followed behind Izuku as he paid for his new attire. "We're paying you a visit," he said. "Are really?" Uraraka wasn't sure that was such a good idea. "It's important for a government director in charge of hero regulation to check in on hero institutions every once in a while," Izuku explained. "Plus it's good to keep your enemies on their toes." "If you say so," Uraraka said nervously. In truth, she was worried it would be awkward mostly for her when they showed up at the school that expelled her not too long ago. "Relax, everything will be fine," Izuku promised. "You got a Class 1A. All right, for those of you that received your provisional licenses, you will be eligible for the work-study program," Aizawa explained to his students. The staff decided to continue teaching class as if everything was normal despite the recent political situation. Similar to the internships, you'll be offered these positions from various hero agencies. The class didn't seem that excited, especially those who were part of the junkyard incident. They obviously were aware what was going on like everyone else, but some of them blamed themselves that they couldn't stop him then and there. "All teachers and staff report to the front entrance immediately," the voice of the principal said over the intercom. Aizawa dropped what he was doing and told his class to stay put. Nizu wouldn't order something like that unless there was an emergency. Rushing down the halls, he was joined by his colleagues who also seemed to be just as in the dark as he was over what was happening. When they arrived to the front courtyard that led to the academy's main entrance, the entire staff was there. "What's this all about?" Power Loader asked. "We were in the middle of teaching our classes," Vlad King said. "He's coming," Nizu said ominously while looking towards the entrance. "Who?" Aizawa followed his gaze. "Izuku Midoriya is coming here to Udata," the small white animal said. Everyone's eyes widened in shock, especially Tashinori's. "Wait. He's coming here? Like today? Like right now?" Midnight questioned. "How long till he gets here?" Snipe asked next. In less than 5 minutes, Nizu said while looking to his watch. Smart kid, Aizawa began. Announcing his arrival right before he gets here. Gives us zero time to prepare. After complimenting the boy's bold move, he tensed up along with everyone else when a black limousine appeared outside the entrance followed by a large armored truck. The door opened and out stepped Midoriya, dark green messy hair, gray suit and Infinity Gauntlet attached to his left hand. It was the next person who stepped out after him that shocked them even further. Ochako Uraraka, former Udata student, looking just as anxious as them. What the hell was she doing with him? You all look tense. Izuku called from outside the entrance with a smile on his face. Like you're ready for a fight? He along with the girl walked up to the threshold. Are you going to turn off the security gate so we can enter? He asked coyly. They all looked at him like he was nuts. We have to do as he asks, Nizu suddenly said. He works for the government that gives us our funding. As long as he doesn't cause harm to the students or the premise he can come and go as he pleases, the principal quoted the policies. You can't be serious, Midnight said. I'm afraid he is. Izuku called again while tapping his foot patiently. Nizu pulled out a small remote and pressed a few buttons deactivating the security system around the front gate of the school. Izuku smirked and took a step forward crossing the entryway into the most prestigious hero school in the country. Uraraka silently followed him. Oh, and one more thing, he snapped his fingers and the armored van opened up. From of the vehicle 6 sleek black Titan robots walked out marching in unison behind their master. Don't mind my security detail, Izuku said nonchalantly while he casually strolled up to the Udata teachers. Good day Director Midoriya, Nizu greeted him choosing to be polite and cordial despite the troubling situation. Pleased to meet you Professor Nizu, Izuku bent down to shake the small creature's hand. May I introduce the first employee of my new department, I'm sure you remember her Ochako Uraraka. He took a bit of sick pleasure in the look on the teachers' faces especially Aizawa and Toshinori. Sorry to alarm you with my sudden arrival but as the director of the new Department of Hero Regulation I thought it best to pay a visit to all the hero schools, just to check in on how things are run here, he smiled almost pleasantly. Please go about your normal routine, don't mind me. Yes, everyone go back to your classes tell them that everything is fine, Nizu ordered, while sending a secret message underneath his words that basically said don't do anything irrational and don't let the students do anything irrational. They all gave the principal a worried look but obeyed. Toshinori wanted so badly to do something about Midoriya. He knew he couldn't though, his hands were tied on this. As he was leaving he didn't notice the small grin that Izuku sent his way. Shall we talk in my office? Lead the way, Izuku walked alongside the small white creature followed by his entourage of robots and his friend Uraraka. Office. Please sit down, have some tea, Nizu kept up the polite facade. Izuku took a seat at a small table that had a chessboard with 2 fresh cups on either side. Uraraka decided to wait outside to avoid the potential awkwardness. Thank you, taking a sip of the tea he smiled at the familiar game. Nizu sat in the opposite chair. Would you indulge me a bit? The principal asked gesturing to the board. After you, Izuku nodded. Nizu started by moving one of the white pawns forward. May I ask what this little visit is really about? The green-haired boy made his first move with his knight instead of a pawn. I already told you, Izuku watched him move another pawn. Just checking in to see how things are conducted at these hero schools, he moved one of his own black pawns. As the director of hero regulation I need to make sure that the future heroes meet the new standards. And what standards do you believe they need to meet? Nizu asked as he moved another piece. I simply want them to be heroes for the right reasons, Izuku began as he made his move. Is that so wrong? To have real heroes who wish to honestly help others and are not in it for money or fame. No, there is nothing wrong with that, Nizu agreed. But have you considered the cost? What will you have to become to achieve such a goal? Maybe I should have been nicer about it. Is that your point? Using his knight Izuku took out a pawn. Use my Infinity Gauntlet to become a hero and symbol of justice and good? Become part of the problem instead of trying to fix it. All I'm saying is that there's still a chance to do the right thing, Nizu told him while taking out one of his pieces. I am doing the right thing. You just think it's wrong because you don't understand. Izuku's moves on the chessboard went from calculated to slightly more aggressive. History will always be the judge over who is right and who is wrong. So you've made up your mind then? Izuku chuckled lightly at the question. It's funny that an animal lucky to be born with such a wonderful quirk thinks he can convince me that I'm wrong in some capacity, he remarked. As if you could possibly understand what it's like to be a quirkless nobody. You don't even allow quirkless kids into your hero classes. That's not true, we changed that rule 5 years ago, Nizu argued. And in all that time not a single quirkless child has attempted your entrance exam or even applied for the program, Izuku put him check. That certainly says a lot. What does it say? Nizu asked as he maneuvered his king out of danger. Allowing quirkless people to take the exam was really nothing more than a publicity stunt. You never had any intention of letting them into the hero program and everyone knows it. It's not like you did anything to encourage or promote a possible quirkless hero, Izuku said accusingly. You and your school value people based on their quirks, just like the rest of the world, he spoke with bitterness. That's also not true, Nizu denied what he said. We value all of our students and those who apply equally. Oh really? The green-haired teen smirked as he moved his pieces. Then why did you expel Uraraka and not Bakugo for that incident at the junkyard? He broke more rules and laws than she did, yet you chose to make an example out of her and not him. The principal didn't have a reply for that. He knew what it looked like from his perspective. I get why you did it. Bakugo has such a powerful quirk and volatile personality that of all the students he's the most at risk to turning into a villain. You and the teachers probably find it easier to let the baby have his bottle than to actually fix the problem. What a wonderful school this is, he said that last part with sarcasm. Why is Miss Uraraka in your employ? Nizu asked in an attempt to change the subject. Though Izuku also noticed the hidden question underneath his inquiry. Are you using her? Unlike you and your staff, I saw great potential in her, Izuku explained. She has the heart of a true hero and I intend to make everyone see that. Nizu picked up on something he said there. It sounded like she was more than just an employee for his department. There was obviously more to this hero regulation program than initially implied, and that worried the principal. Staff lounge. All Might sat on the couch in his true form, wiping the nervous sweat from his brow. Izuku Midoriya just walked into U.A as if it was normal. The fact that he would do something so bold after just being given his new position showed how confident he was. Just as he was wondering what he should do about this, the young third year that he wanted to be his successor barged into the room. He's here, isn't he? Mirio started. How did you know? Toshinori wondered. Some students saw him arrive from the windows and words gotten around. As soon as he heard the news that the new director of hero regulation was here on the grounds, he immediately went looking for his teacher All Might. Yes, he's here and the entire staff is on edge, the gaunt man admitted. Good. I can talk to him in person. Mirio began to leave, but Toshinori quickly halted his progress with a hand on his shoulder. Look, young Mirio, I admire your enthusiasm, but what do you think talking to Midoriya will accomplish? The hero told him. I myself couldn't get through to him. I really think he's beyond words at this point. I don't believe that, Mirio argued. No one is beyond words, least of all a kid who clearly doesn't understand what he's doing. Young Mirio, Toshinori sighed. I really don't want you going near him just yet, he told the honest truth. Not only is Midoriya in possession of One for All, but I think he also has All for One. The third year paled a bit at the mention of that awful quirk. All Might told him about the villain he defeated and now stayed locked in Tartarus. If Izuku Midoriya had that quirk as part of his gauntlet, the damage he could do with it would be astronomical. Then what do we do? First I need to confirm whether or not he has it, Toshinori told him. Then I don't know, he frowned in frustration. If I could just get that gauntlet off of him, then he wouldn't be such a threat. No offense All Might, but it's that kind of thinking that made him what he is today. Mirio reminded him that it was everyone believing quirkless people were weak and helpless that led Midoriya to this present position. Toshinori frowned. He did it again, but old habits are hard to stop. For now we watch him, he told his protege. I don't think he'll start a fight. I don't think anyone will start one with him either, Mirio sounded assured. Well, there is young Bakugo, apparently they have a bad history together. All Might suddenly grew extremely worried. He knew how quick to anger the boy was. A thought also occurred to him as well. What if Midoriya was counting on that? What if he came here knowing Bakugo would attack him on sight and that would give Izuku a reason to bring his new authority down on the other boy? If he truly had All for One, then this could all be a trap set to take Katsuki's quirk. I'll be back. Whatever you do, don't approach Midoriya yet. Toshinori went to go warn Aizawa to keep Bakugo away from their guest visitor. Halls of U.A. What a wonderful facility, Izuku commented as he strolled through the halls of the prestigious hero school. He marveled at the state-of-the-art training rooms they passed. As someone who could never walk this campus as a student due to his quirkless nature, he found great joy and satisfaction to be able to tour the place as much as his heart desired. Yeah, it's nice, Ochako sighed longingly. It was with a heavy heart that she followed him around the very school she was kicked out of where her previous dream ended. Luckily Izuku was there at her lowest point to give her a new dream and purpose. Cheer up, Uraraka. I know how hard this is for you. Izuku turned around to face her, silently gesturing for his titans to stop. Life and the goals we set are about moving forward, not looking behind. Then what are we doing here? Ochako asked. She still didn't fully understand why they came to her former school in the first place. We're here looking for those who also wish to move forward like us. Izuku turned to look down the hall where he finally spotted the room he was looking for. The support class. With a warm smile he walked right up to the development studio and without knocking went to open the door. Only for a big explosion of black smoke to blow the doors open and a figure to nearly crash into him. Izuku, without flinching, used the reality stone's power to catch it before it reached him. The robots growled for a moment before going back to standby mode after determining that it was not a threat to their master. Uraraka's eyes widened in surprise at what just happened. I guess the fuel output was set too high, a girl's voice giggled from the smoke. Or maybe the generator overheated too fast. Mei Hatsum, Izuku held her up in the air with his power and the girl had yet to realize it yet. Still blowing things up, I see. Mei looked down to see Izuku standing there in the middle of the hall. Izuku! She exclaimed loudly. She hadn't seen him since his big debut on the news 4 days ago. Part of her was shocked watching what happened to Endeavor, but the inventor in her was also fascinated and overjoyed at seeing the finished version of the Titans. Speaking of which, there was a group of shiny black ones behind Gravity Girl. Are those the new models? Let me see. Let me see. She thrashed and wriggled in the air. Calm down. Izuku let her down and released his hold on her. All in good time, he glanced into the design studio and noticed that Power Loader wasn't present. Where's your teacher? He said something about needing to be in the surveillance room for something. I don't know, I wasn't really listening, she laughed. Gee, I wonder what he'd be doing in the surveillance room. Izuku smirked knowingly. Well, since he's not here, could I have a word with you in private? Sure, Mei agreed. Do you mind if I speak to her alone? He asked Uraraka. The Gravity Girl nodded and decided to wander off for a bit while they talked. Izuku followed Mei into the workshop while ordering one of the Titans to come inside while the rest waited in the hall. So this is the final model? Mei skipped around the unmoving robot examining every detail. No, this is the basic Titan soldier that will be incorporated into the police forces, Izuku told her. The ones you saw beat up Endeavor were the specialty models, specifically the anti-fire quirk versions. Wait, there's more specialty models? Mei asked. Of course, Izuku smiled at her enthusiasm. We got Titans for all elemental quirk users, telekinetic quirks, and strength quirks. They're not invincible, but they do make tough foot soldiers. After letting her geek out over the robot, he decided now was the time to talk seriously. So how have you been? I've been good, still making babies, so nothing's changed much, Mei said honestly. I never got a chance to apologize to you, Hatsum. Izuku's tone was sincere. Apologize? For what? Mei wondered what he would need to say sorry for. In case you thought I was using you. I wasn't. I've only ever seen you as a friend and colleague. He gave her assurance that he was never manipulating her in any way. How about we forget about it? If she suddenly placed her hands on his Infinity Gauntlet and lifted it up so she could get a good look at it. You tell me how this baby works. His eyes turned sparkly for a brief moment and Izuku had to wonder if that was part of her quirk. I could tell you. Izuku released her hold. But if I did, I'd have to kill you. She laughed at that. I wasn't joking, he mumbled to himself, but just let her laugh and think he was kidding. It's not like he planned on telling her or anyone for that matter how his Infinity Gauntlet worked, no matter what no one but him must know. Now for the main reason I came to speak with you. Izuku took a step closer to Hatsum. Would you be interested in a job? Would you like to work for me in my department of hero regulation? First of all, what would you need a psycho inventor for when you're already a mad genius yourself? Mei questioned. Second, I'm still a high schooler. Are you even allowed to hire someone like me? In reverse order. As a government director, I can employ anybody I chose no matter the age or qualifications, Izuku explained. The reason I want you in the department is because I need your help. I may be a mad genius like you said, but I can't do everything by myself. He decided to tell her the truth about what came next in his plan. My department isn't just going to regulate hero behavior and activity. The main purpose is to create an example of what model heroes should be. That's why Uraraka has joined me. With more training and proper gear, she'll be one of the first new heroes that my department produces. And you need me to help with that? Mei looked at him with a curious gaze. Well, I figured with your wonderful potential for making babies you'd want to make some for the future great heroes. Izuku looked around the workshop that U.A provided for its students. Would you rather sit around here for 3 years earning a diploma than working your way up some corporate ladder for a decade? Or would like to join me right now and make a difference in this world? He reached into his pocket and handed her a card with a number on it. Think on it. After that he ordered his robot to leave and went to follow it out the doors, but not before one last bit of incentive. Also think on this, your own personal workshop 10 times the size of this one is what would await you should you join us. Izuku smirked, seeing the excited look on Mei's face, like a kid was told he was going to a candy store. I'll be seeing you. He waved goodbye and went to go find Ochako. Meanwhile, Shinso Hitoshi stared at the 3 second years in front of him with a bored expression. Ever since the sports festival where he got further than anybody expected a general studies student to get, other students would often hound him about how a kid with villainous quirk could get that far. Of course they assume he cheated, which Shinso would scoff at. A physical competition against students who could generate ice, create explosions, had engines in their legs, and he must have cheated by using his God-given brainwashing quirk? What a load of crap. He tried his best just like everyone else and failed because he wasn't lucky enough to be born with an overpowered quirk, like that Bakugo asshole. What's the matter, not gonna say anything? The guy with goat-like features stared down. Careful, that's how his villain quirk activates. He needs to talk, another guy with a third eye on his forehead mocked. Shinso could use his quirk and make them leave him alone, but he wouldn't give them the satisfaction. He was going to be a hero no matter what. Excuse me, a voice said from behind the group. Shinso recognized the girl. She was that girl from Class 1A that got expelled. What was she doing here? I couldn't help but notice you picking on this fellow here. What's it to you, girl? Yeah, get out of here. In a matter of seconds Ochako was suddenly between them and Shinso, and the group of bullies were floating up to the ceiling. What? Were they bothering you? Uraraka asked, looking towards the purple-haired boy while adjusting her gloves. Yeah, a bit. How did you do that? He remembered how she used her quirk in the sports festival. She had to touch them to nullify their gravity and make them float up. After I was expelled I gained a new friend who helped teach me new ways I can use my quirk. She looked to the students who were now desperately trying to gain a grip on the ceiling. Now I try to use a light touch so my targets don't even feel or know I've touched them until it's too late. I've even worked on my speed as well. That she has, another voice spoke from the end of the hall. Izuku appeared there with his mechanical bodyguards in his wake. As I told Uraraka, there's other ways to be strong. He walked up to Ochako and Shinso. I remember you from the sports festival. Shinso Hitoshi, right? Yeah, that's me. Shinso kept a cautious stare on the guy in front of him. Izuku Midoriya, the quirkless villain that fought All Might and gained a position in the government. You did very well with your brainwashing quirk in the competitions. Until Bakugo figured it out in the tournament and blew you out of the ring, Izuku said rather bluntly. I was still impressed by your performance though. He spoke freely to the boy without care for the other's quirk, which surprised Shinso. Aren't you worried I might use my quirk on you? The purple-haired boy suddenly asked. Oh, I wouldn't even try if I were you. Izuku pointed his thumb back at the robots behind him. Those titans are equipped with scanners that detect the activation of quirks and will attack you without hesitation. Should you use yours on me, they'd crush your windpipe before you could order me to order them to stop. He then smirked deviously. You wouldn't even get the full sentence out. I'll take your word for it. Shinso sweated a bit under the menacing gaze of the tall, imposing robots. Well, it was nice meeting you. Good luck with your studies. Izuku smiled brightly and waved goodbye. Let's go find this amazing class keep hearing about, he remarked as he walked off with his mechanical guards. Ochako smiled at general class student as well and placed her fingers together to return gravity to the 3 bullies still stuck to the ceiling like balloons. The students crashed painfully on the floor, much to Shinso's amusement. When he turned around, Izuku and Uraraka were gone. I need to see this. Shinso Hitoshi decided to follow after the two of them. Part of him was just curious to see what would happen, but the other part was hoping he'd knock someone down a peg. Class 1A. So which hero agency are you going to for your work-study program? Yaoyorozu asked her fellow classmate Todoroki after the lunch break bell rang. I figured you'd go with your father. His agency doesn't exist anymore, Shoto said. That's right, I heard that new government department shut it down, Mina said. What happened to Endeavor anyway? Kirishima asked the hot and cold boy. He showed up at the house yesterday, but he hasn't said anything to any of us, Shoto told them. There's another thing, something happened to his quirk. Before he could explain, Bakugo stormed out the door rather loudly and Kirishima worriedly chased after him. Apparently he's still upset because he's the only student in their class that won't be doing the work-study program. He is the only one of them that failed to get their provisional license. He'll be taking the remedial training according to Aizawa. He's in a bad mood, Kaminari supplied. When is he not in a bad mood? Tsuyu said with a quiet croak. He's never been this bad though, Shiro commented. Everyone made their way into the hallway as they went to go get lunch. They were stopped when a familiar person appeared at the other end of the hall. So this is the famous Class 1A? Izuku smiled as he walked towards the shocked group of students. The ones who fought real villains and survived, the champions of U.A and the future generation of heroes, the students all paled at the sight of him. They were told a special guest was here at U.A by their homeroom teacher, and they were also told not to worry about. Now they understood why Aizawa didn't want them to worry. The entire class didn't know how to react. Ida, being the brave one, stepped forward in a protective manner between his classmates and the wielder of the Infinity Gauntlet. I don't know what you're doing here, but please, this a school. Izuku just waved Ida off. Oh relax, I'm only here to ruffle some feathers and do my job, the green-haired teen smiled. Which is? To keep the heroes in line and make sure they're doing their jobs for the right reasons, Izuku supplied. Let's see if I remember. He stepped a little closer, making Ida flinch. There was Shoto Todoroki, Tenya Ida, Momo Yaoyorozu, Tsuyu Azui, and Eijiro Kirishima. You were the ones who bravely fought me at Raxus Junkyard. I never got a chance to commend you for your wonderfully heroic behavior, Izuku applauded them. I know your teachers scolded you for it, but they're too obsessed with bureaucracy and the value of quirks to know what real heroics are anymore. What about Ochako? Tsuyu blurted out while standing up to him as well. She went looking for you there first, and yet she was expelled because of you. If anyone is heroic, it's her. You're absolutely right, Izuku agreed with her. That's why I decided to lend her a helping hand. Isn't that right, Uraraka? A stunned silence quieted the whole group when another familiar person stepped around the row of Titan robots. Hi, she greeted them awkwardly. Uraraka. Ida was the first to get over his shock. Just what on earth are you doing with him? He kept a wary eye Izuku, who decided to stand back and watch the whole interaction. You know what he is and you must know what he's done. And? The gravity girl wondered what his point was. So why are you with him? Ida demanded to know why she would ally herself with someone like Midoriya. Because he's right. Because his beliefs are just, Uraraka said honestly. Izuku's goal to correct our hero-based society is something I wish to support. I find that hard to believe that's all he wants, Yaoyorozu spoke up. I don't expect you to understand, Momo Yaoyorozu, Izuku said, directing his gaze to her. You who was born into wealth, born with a wonderfully versatile quirk. I have nothing personal against you, but you, like many others, are blind to the problems of this world. That seemed to silence Momo. Passing over her, his eyes landed on Todoroki. How's your father doing, Shoto? He made it back home safely, I presume? Izuku said with mirth. What did you do to him? The bicolor-haired boy asked, with more curiosity rather than anger. He wasn't fit for the position of a hero, so I revoked his status in more ways than one, Izuku shrugged. Simple as that. I don't see what the big deal about Endeavor was. All it took was a few well-built Titan robots to take him down. Indeed, Shoto found himself agreeing with the other teen. He used to always be intimidated by his father's overwhelming power, but ever since Izuku convinced him that his destiny was to surpass his father and be a hero unlike either him or All Might, he started to see Endeavor for what he was. A failure that could only pass his selfish goals on to others rather than complete them himself. After watching him get trashed by those machines on the news, in Shoto's eyes that once powerful, intimidating man looked extremely small now. For all the man's ambitions and plans, it was all over for him now. Undone by one quirkless genius who not only took everything that mattered most from Endeavor, but he also exposed all of the man's dirty secrets to the light. For that Shoto was grateful. He already hated the man for what he put his mother and his childhood through, but after learning of the older brother Tuya that he never knew and never would, he hated his father even more now. So how are you doing then? He was asking about his quirk. Shoto of course read between the lines. Not that it's any of your business, but I've been learning how to use the fire side of my quirk since our battle, the youngest Todoroki told him truthfully. Ah, but it is my business. You're all future heroes, and as the director of hero regulation it's my job to make sure you're prepared and are doing your job as heroes for the right reasons. When he said that last part he glared down at a rather short kid with purple balls for hair. Minoru Mineta. Izuku had completed his analysis of him after the USJ incident and he wasn't impressed with the boy's quirk or his personality. Judging by how the student was shaking in terror at the sight of him and cowering behind one of the girl's legs, he hadn't improved at all. Hell, no one else besides Ida, Azui, Todoroki, and Yaoyorozu had bothered to speak up to him. The others were clearly too frightened of him. What the hell? Bakugo turned the corner and spotted Deku standing there in front of his classmates. At first he thought it was another hallucination, but everyone else could clearly see him too. Finally some normalcy. Izuku smiled at the breath of fresh air and predictability that Katsuki Bakugo brought. The blonde stomped over to him, palms sparkling. Hey man, don't do anything rash. Kirishima placed a hand on his friend's shoulder to stop him. Oh yes, please do something rash. Izuku waved his hand silently, ordering his titans to stand by and do nothing. Don't listen to him, he's just trying to get under your skin. The redhead kept a tighter hold on Bakugo. I get it, he beat you up pretty bad at the junkyard, but that's no reason to get this angry. Really? Izuku raised a brow at that. You really think that's why he hates me so much? He then looked to Katsuki. So you didn't tell him or the rest of your classmates? Interesting. Tell us what? Tenya asked. It appears your friend Bakugo decided to remain tight-lipped about his past, specifically who and what he really is. Izuku smiled at them. Allow me to shed some light on the matter. You see, when Bakugo here got his quirk in preschool, everyone around him, the adults and the kids, praised him for it, he explained. Sadly, that created a massive superiority complex and gave birth to an arrogance and ego that could rival the gods. He enjoyed the furious look on the explosive blonde's face. And so Bakugo here became the worst school bully, doing whatever he wanted to anybody. Especially me, isn't that right, Kaken? Kirishima released his hold on Bakugo. He called me Deku, the useless, worthless, quirkless nerd. He's blasted me with his quirk more times than he's probably hit you all with it in training. He did that? The redhead at first didn't want to believe that, but he wasn't blind to Bakugo's violent personality. He just never thought the other would stoop so low as to bully a defenseless person. So you didn't know then? Izuku frowned. Forgive me for thinking the worst of you, Eijiro Kirishima. I thought you were one of those parasitic leeches who ride the coattails of those in power without a care for what the person's done. Just like his former middle school lackeys. It seems you simply didn't know the truth. My sincerest apologies. Everyone went from looking at Izuku to staring at Katsuki. Some looked at him in contempt like Ochako, Ida, and Todoroki. Others like Kirishima and Mina were staring at him in disappointment. Bakugo finally had enough of the accusing eyes and turned his fury on the cause of this. Launching forward, his hand reached out to blast Deku off his feet. Time slowed down as Izuku's mouth widened into a pleased grin. He raised his gauntlet and opened the palm as the soul stone glowed in eerie purple. No explosion came and a gray capture weapon wrapped securely around Bakugo's body, pinning his arms to his side and hauling him away from the green-haired director. What a joy that could have been! Izuku thought as he sighed in disappointment and deactivated the soul stone. I'd appreciate it if you didn't harass my students, Aizawa said as he kept a tight hold on Bakugo with his scarf while making sure the boy's quirk was erased. He arrived just in time to see the blonde attacking the boy once known as the villain Apotheosis. I was merely educating them on things they didn't know. That's what a teacher is supposed to do, right? Izuku explained himself while simultaneously calling Erasure Head's methods into question. Helping the students to be the future heroes is what this institution is all about, but judging how Katsuki Bakugo is still snarling at me like a rabid dog, it seems the school's behavioral practices are not as good as I imagined. Izuku took a step closer to the still captured Bakugo. He's been here for over a semester and yet he's still the same violent boy that tormented me through my childhood. You've got your work cut out for you, Aizawa-sensei. He leaned in closer to the blonde's angry face. I honestly can't wait for you to become a legal registered hero, Kaken, because then you'll be under my jurisdiction. His smile promised future misery for the explosive teen. Bakugo wanted to scream curse words at him, but Erasure's capture scarf wrapped around his mouth while the teacher dragged him off somewhere. Izuku hummed in thought as he watched his former bully get taken away. Did Aizawa figure out what the soul stone does? Or did somebody else figure it out and warned him? Questions he would save for later. Was that true? What you just said about Bakugo? Kirishima asked, stepping forward courageously. Yes. That's the sad truth about this world, Kirishima. Those with power get to do whatever they want to those who lack it, Izuku explained to him. Isn't that right, Todoroki? He's right, the class gasped in shock when Shoto once again agreed with Midoriya. For a while I didn't fully understand why I disliked Bakugo, but now I think it's because he's very similar to my father. Fear not though, because I'm not letting bad people like them be heroes anymore, Izuku nodded to them. Have a nice day everyone, I look forward to seeing more from this wonderful class. He turned to walk away followed by his titans. Ochako bowed apologetically to her former classmates and trailed after him. What about you? Momo finally spoke up, finding courage to contradict him. When you have everything the way you want it, you'll be the last bad person left. So what happens to you? Bad person? Izuku turned and walked back over to her, getting a bit into her personal space for intimidation. It didn't help that he also stood at the same height as her either. So you think the person who is trying to fix the problems of this world, problems that other people created, is evil? He stared into her eyes, letting his glow green with the power stone for a moment. You have some growing up to do, Yaoyorozu. Goodbye for now. He broke eye contact and turned to leave, letting Momo release the breath she was holding. Empty classroom. Let me go, damn it. Katsuki thrashed and yelled. Enough. Aizawa released him quickly, letting him fall against a desk. He was going to shout some more, but Erasure cut him off before he could. I know what your problem with Midoriya is. What? Bakugo froze. So you heard what he said too? No. After the junkyard incident we noticed by your injuries that Midoriya gave you special attention, so Nizu investigated your history and past relationship with him. He paused for a moment. If there's things I can't stand, it's bullying and racism. He glared down at his student. Midoriya thinks that we don't care about your personality and are only interested in your powerful quirk like everyone else in your life before UA. Well, I'm here to tell you that he's wrong. I'm about to do something that should have been done a long time. Katsuki Bakugo, you are not the best. You have a dangerous and destructive quirk that in my opinion is only good for causing physical harm to others. I don't think you're cut out to be a hero, but the principal thinks you'll change with time and effort. After Raxus we let you off easy because we felt sorry for how badly you were beaten by Midoriya, which was a mistake. You should have been expelled instead of Uraraka. Aizawa continued to scold the blonde, who remained silent, having never been talked down to like this before. You helped make Midoriya what he is today. To that boy you were a villain, not a hero. You need to learn that terrible actions have terrible consequences, so starting tomorrow you will report for counseling, and Best Jeanist gave us an interesting idea with how to teach you humility. I won't spoil the surprise, but all I'm saying is that if nothing comes from it you might just consider yourself expelled in the future. Aizawa exhaled, having said what he needed to say. Is that all? Katsuki said quietly in a very uncharacteristic way, swallowing the lump in his throat as his eyes stung a bit. Yes, and count yourself lucky that I showed up in time to stop you. Aizawa scolded him again on his reckless behavior. All Might has a theory about that stone in the palm of his gauntlet, the one you and the others tried to keep from him. If he's right, then you just came very close to losing your quirk. What are you talking about? Bakugo looked at him like he was crazy. How would a shiny stone take away his quirk? Outside. This was a fun day, wasn't it? Izuku smiled as Ochako walked beside him. Well, you've certainly antagonized them all. Uraraka, despite what she just said, had finally figured out one of the real reasons they came here. Izuku obviously wanted to test the waters and see where he stood with future recruits. Hatsum was his main objective, but she could tell that Izuku was also interested in Todoroki and Ida. How he intended to sway them to his side was still a mystery to her though. Midoriya, wait. A voice called out to him, making him pause and turn around. A skinny, frail-looking blonde man in an oversized yellow suit jogged up to him. All Might, shouldn't you be taking it easy considering you condition? Izuku said with fake concern as the man took a moment to catch his breath. I just wanted to speak to you, not as a hero. Person to person, Toshinori walked closer to him, noticing how the robots emitted a light growling noise when he got too close. I understand you don't want to hear another apology from me, nor do you want to hear me say that you can become a hero again. Izuku narrowed his eyes at that. I just want you to think about what you're doing. Really think about it and ask yourself, is what you're doing right? Is it just? I did think about, Izuku told him. I thought about what I would do with the Infinity Gauntlet once I obtained it for a long time. What I plan to do is more than just, it's fair. Fair and balanced, just as all things should be. Fair and balanced? Is that what you call stealing Endeavor's quirk? The Gaunt Man called him out on that. Izuku just smiled and raised his gauntlet, creating a ball of fire in his palm. So All Might figured out the soul stone then. Was it fair that Endeavor got to be the number 2 hero while tormenting and abusing his own family? Izuku asked him. Was it fair that you lied to the world for years about your quirk? Was it fair that you gave people like me false hope? You have to understand that as the symbol of peace everyone's hopes are riding on me being an invincible hero, All Might sighed sadly. I didn't like it, but as long as everyone was safe and smiling it seemed like it was worth it. Meanwhile the quirkless rejects like myself were being pushed around and stepped on by society, Izuku argued back with a glare. Your lies gave us and me something to hope for. I thought that anyone could be a hero, I really did, until you told me the truth. You said someone without a quirk can't be a hero, that it wasn't possible. He extinguished the fire in his hand. You're wrong, All Might. Anyone can be a hero, and they deserve a chance to at least try. Toshinori swallowed the apology that was forming in his mouth. Saying sorry wouldn't help him anymore. Izuku, Uraraka approached him holding her phone. The Prime Minister called and said the Senate approved the building of your new base. That was fast, Izuku laughed lightly. Funny how quickly the government's wheels turn when someone's wielding an all-powerful gauntlet. Well, it was nice talking to you, All Might. He waved goodbye and made his way to where his limousine was waiting for them. And what about you, young Uraraka? Toshinori looked to the brown-haired girl that stood with Midoriya. Do you think this is all fair and just? I've chosen my side, was all she said before turning around and following after him. The Titan robots loaded themselves into the armored truck and the 2 vehicles left the Hero Academy. All Might could only watch them leave, completely powerless to stop him. Later OFF the coast of Japan. This seems like the perfect spot, Izuku told the pilot of the helicopter to slow down. He then ordered him to open up the back. Are you sure, sir? The pilot hesitated, not used to calling a kid such a formal title. Do it please. The back of the military-grade chopper opened up, revealing the downpour of wind and rain outside. Izuku looked out into the ocean and took a step off. He didn't fall like most would expect and instead hovered in midair. Once the helicopter was a safe distance away, he looked to the sky. This storm is annoying. He pointed his gauntlet upwards and waved his hands a few times. The clouds started to part, halting the storm, letting the sunlight in and creating a giant pillar of light around Izuku and the area he wanted to work with. That's better. The Reality Stone and Power Stone glowed brightly as he reached down towards the ocean beneath him. Ha! He yelled as he started to make a pulling motion with his gauntlet. The waters began to churn and ripple as something large was pulled from the ocean floor. A large rocky surface was the first to emerge, raising up out of the water further until a big island was formed surrounded by a sheer cliff. Izuku had used his power to create a new land mass off the coast of Japan. Slowly levitating down, the green-haired gauntlet user gently landed on his newly made island. Upon this rock I will build my church, he mockingly quoted as he took a look around the foundation for what would become his future base of operations. His phone suddenly went off, interrupting his musings. Seeing the unknown number, he smiled, having an idea who it was. I've been trying to get in contact with you for the past 3 days, he said as he answered the phone. You're a hard man to reach, Stain. You've outdone yourself, kid, the hero killer finally said. You know, I had a hunch that you were going to accomplish great things, and I always trust my instincts. Did you see the news about Endeavor? I'm pretty sure I won our little bet, Izuku declared in victory. That you did, so what do you want me to do, boss? He could hear the smirk in Stain's voice, and that too brought a smile to his face. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like, subscribe and support the original writer. See you next time.